notice on July 28th, 2020 to the Courier News, the Echo Sentinel, the Star Ledger, Tappan to Warren, and the clerks of the Borough of Watchung and Township of Greenbrook, Long Hill, and Warren. Roll call, please, Mr. Stives.
Dr. Chand? Mr. Fallon? Mr. Hayek?
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Here.
Mrs. Ober?
Here.
Ms. Potter?
Here.
Dr. Shabilsky?
Here.
Ms. Raban? And Ms. Barone?
Here. Okay, you're going to share the flag.
Yes, I'm going to do that right now. Oops. Okay, a couple more people just joined us. Let me admit them.
Okay, if you could all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the
of the United States of America
States of America.
and to the republic
To the republic
for which it stands,
for which it stands,
one nation, under God,
one nation,
indivisible,
under God,
with liberty and justice for all.
liberty and justice for all.
Okay. I will need a motion to go into executive session in accordance with provisions of the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act. Be it hereby resolved that the board move into executive session to discuss confidential personnel and legal matters and the CSA evaluation, after which action may be taken. It is expected that the matters discussed in executive session will be made public as soon as the need for confidentiality no longer exists. May I please have a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll see you in a half an hour.
Okay.
All right, so
Do you want to take
we're
this?
going to move into our regular agenda. The first thing in our regular agenda is board correspondence. Since our last meeting, where we had determined that we were going to suspend the use of our logo and mascot and form the committee, we have had numerous people suggest send in emails regarding interest. The superintendent is has all those emails and is compiling, and we'll work on that committee after we get through with the reopening plan. That's really all the board correspondence that we had. And then we'll go into reports and presentations.
So I do have actually a
45.
yep.
Wow.
How you doing? Good.
Keep everybody muted, Liz.
I'm trying to. If I can't take people's ability to unmute themselves away, because then you guys can't unmute yourselves.
Okay, so
I
if everybody
wasn't
can
making-
mute
Yeah.
themselves, LW, whoever that is, can you please mute
I
yourself?
can mute them. I can. Yep.
Thank you.
So for members of the
I'll
public,
just call people out.
we ask that you stay muted with your video off. And if I call on you during public comment, I will unmute you. But it just helps with the recording of the meeting and the running of the meeting. That's how we have been running the meetings thus far via Zoom, and it's worked pretty well.
Thank you. Okay, so reports and presentations, or did you have something that's during
Nope,
your
sorry.
comments next?
Yep, superintendent's
Okay.
comments.
All right.
So these will be very brief because we have quite a lengthy presentation. But I did want to start off with some really exciting news that we just learned last week, that our graduate just learned last week. So you may recall in January, one of our board meetings, I announced that Jagdeep Bhatia, a member of the class of 2020, was selected as one of 40 finalists nationwide in the Regeneron Science Talent Search 2020. So he was scheduled to attend a live process for the finalists in March in Washington, D.C. However, due to the pandemic, that was postponed, and a virtual event was recently held. And last week, during the awards event, it was announced that he finished second in the nation, earning a prize of $175,000. So we are, there will be a press release in the paper. We are so tremendously proud of him. We've had students finish in the top 300. He was the first to make it as a top 40 finalist, and certainly the first to ever finish that high. The first place winner, I believe, was a student from New Mexico. So he did amazingly well. And we wish him all the best as he heads off to college next year. But this was really outstanding for him. So I was very excited to share that news. And one other comment just for the public. Once we start the presentation and I share my screen, it's difficult for me to see participants waiting to enter. So I will try and check periodically, but obviously the members of the leadership team and I will be presenting. So it's going to be difficult for me to monitor that the whole time. So if you join after the presentation is started or attempt to join, you may not get to enter the meeting right away. So I just want to give everyone a heads up on that. Okay.
Okay, so I just have a quick comment. Having attended many of the committee meetings and phone calls through the last month, I just want to commend the entire administration and staff, teachers who were involved, our health department that was involved in terms of putting together this reopening plan. It was a huge endeavor, and I just wanted to thank all of you on behalf of the board. Other than that, I think we should move into business administrator comments, and then we'll get to the reopening plan.
Thank you, Madam President. We just a couple of things that we discussed in the operations committee meeting that are outside the reopening plan. One is as the board knows, we lost state aid of $151,000 and some change. And what we're proposing to do is to fill that void with surplus that we're able to build over the last 6 or 7 months. So what you'll see is a resolution on the board, just basically showing the reduction in state aid and then the increase in the use of surplus. That amounts about $151,000. That's one thing we discussed in operations. The second thing was we had a bus bid for just Long Hill Township. We have 5 routes that we couldn't renew in June. So what we did was we went out to bid for all 5. The route prices came up pretty high. We're in the 70s, just so you guys know. So First Student was one of our vendors. It was in the 70s. The other one was actually in the 60s. It was 2 routes with Barker. These bids came back at 90. So it's significantly higher, which we expected. So what we're proposing is just to kind of hold on. We have a meeting in mid-August, August 18th. So what we would like to do is possibly renew our routes from last year with First Student, which is 3 of them with Long Hill. The reason we couldn't back in June is because they were uncertain if they were going to have their Chatham site. So about on July 22nd, they learned they did get that approved and are willing to renew at the 1.7%. So again, I would like to hold off as long as possible because because there is uncertainty whether we're actually going to have the reopening plan as proposed based on the governor and his thought process. So we have those 3 routes, and then the other 2, what we were looking to do is potentially do that in-house. We have drivers that are willing to do that. And again, based on the uncertainty, I'd rather not go into the year with a 10-month contract if I can avoid it. Just so you know, the other 10-month contracts we have, if the school's closed, we're going to be responsible based on current law to pay 80% of that contract. So obviously, if we don't have a contract to pay, then I will be paying 80% of nothing. But there are some legalities in terms of salaries and benefits and things that we're still trying to work through. But anyway, that's the initial plan of where we're going. But we have some time from now to August 18th to figure that all out. And that was it, Madam President.
Thank you so much, Tim. So I think we can go into the reopening plan at this point.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, which will have the presentation, and the administrators that are going to be presenting, you can go ahead and turn your cameras on, and I will put this on speaker view, so that way for the recording and those of you who are watching this, you should be able to see the presentation and the person who is speaking at the time. Okay.
Liz,
Okay.
this is Bill.
Yeah.
I was saying I can't start my video because you have stopped it.
Yep, I just started it, so see if you can do it now.
There you go. Thank you.
Good? Okay.
It's
Everyone else?
Michelle, same thing.
Michelle, let me do that as well. Okay, you should be good now. Anyone else? Okay. So before we get into the plan, similarly to Ms. Barone, I really want to thank everyone for your input and support over the past 5 months since we had to close and transition to distance learning, and during the past month-long development process of our reopening plan. We essentially took something that is similar to a strategic planning process that we generally would spend a year on and had to accomplish it in less than a month. So it was challenging to say the least. In addition to those of you who participated directly and formally on one of the reopening teams, we also received a great deal of input and feedback from parents, from students, from staff, as well as members of our community at large, including parents and community members who are medical professionals. And in addition to this input, we have been following the guidelines of the CDC, the AAP, and the NJDOE. And I think as most of you are aware, there is no unanimity among these different groups or among the medical professionals within our towns and our communities. And I think that, that highlights the fact that what we are about to present to you on our reopening plan will elicit many differing opinions. As per the directive we've been issued by the governor and the NJDOE, we are working hard to do the best we can to reopen our schools safely and in a way that works to meet the needs of our students. The plan we are presenting tonight is our plan as of August 3rd, 2020. As you've seen, the directives and the guidance changes almost on a daily basis. And so we will continue to adjust and adapt as we get new and changing guidance. And as we implement the plan throughout September, we will also continue to review and refine it because we know that adjustments will need to be made. And we are committed to remaining as responsive as possible to the changing needs and circumstances, always keeping student and staff health and safety at the forefront. And that is why the first slide in our presentation, where we talk about the guiding principles of the reopening plan, the first thing we have here is the health and safety of our students and staff. We have spent a tremendous amount of time consulting with our local health official, with the committees, with superintendents and in other districts to look at their plans, to really make sure that this is the main priority in our plan. And what closely follows that are our student learning needs, both academic and social emotional. And so that is what we are going to take you through tonight. And the way we've structured the presentation is we are going to go through the 10 critical areas as defined by the NJDOE in the guidance document. But before we get to that, we know the piece that everyone is most interested in is what the schedule will look like. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Librera so that he can share that with you.
Thank you, Dr.
I'm
Jewett.
sorry, Mr. Librera. I forgot I had a couple more slides. Just to give everyone a little background on the composition of our reopening teams. We did have over 50 participants across the 6 teams, the main district reopening team, our communications team, our curriculum planning team, our special education planning team, our crisis response team, and our operations team. And this is just a list of the representatives that were across those groups. So we really did get input from a cross-section of our community, and that's what's going into this plan. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Librera.
Thank you, Dr. Jewett. I hope everyone is enjoying their summer, staying dry tomorrow. And I know that we have a lot to get through today, but I just want to appreciate everybody for coming on tonight and hearing what we have worked through. On the heels of what Dr. Jewett said, we working from the directive from Governor Murphy about creating a hybrid schedule consisting of in-person and virtual learners. That was our first goal. And after consultation with our committees and the aforementioned slide, feedback from our staff and students, parents, and in conversation with other districts, we decided, or we felt that it was the need to create a plan that was synchronous instruction for our virtual learners. In case we have to go out on all virtual learning, that it would allow for a smooth transition. Also, that we wanted to be in concert with our K-8 districts when possible, so that our families would have children in multiple buildings, that everybody understands what each other is doing. Also, we need to fulfill our NJDOE requirements, make sure that we are meeting the needs and satisfying the requirements, whether they are the standards or some of the information that was in the road back document that we have to work within the parameters. It was decided that it was best to run an early dismissal school day, as to avoid a lunch period, as there was just so many difficulties in posting a lunch, being that the state hasn't even figured out how to run in-person dining, that it was not wise to have that be on the day for our students. But with that, we know that eating is going to be a requirement, not requirement, but it's tough for kids to go 5 hours without eating. So in efforts to avoid students eating at inopportune times, putting people in difficult situations, we thought it would be necessary to build in a snack time to address nutritional need and to keep the health and safety of everybody involved. So with these in mind, we built the following schedule, which was on the next slide. So as I stated earlier, we are going with an early dismissal model, and to follow the New Jersey Department of Education for an early dismissal model to work, we need 4 hours of instruction. So we thought it would be best to break our day down to 4 one-hour blocks with our normal passing time of 50 minutes. The only thing that is unique in here is that you see in the third time slot, that is the snack break that I referred to. And what that is half the classes would report to a snack designated area at either the beginning of third time slot, or the ending of third time slot. That is, there is a gap of 45 minutes in that time slot for us to clean that area. It is our plan to have that snack outside, and we have been working with the district to ascertain facilities that would enable us that, with the purchase of tents or outside facilities, so that students are never eating inside the building. However, if it is a poor weather day like tomorrow might be, then we would have to make obviously special precautions. Also, as you see at the end, we have a 10-minute dismissal to buses and cars, and that will hopefully allow us to revisit and make sure that the departure of our building is safe and that we're properly boarding our buses in a timely fashion for them to drop the students off and then to return to their other routes in the afternoon. So that is the schedule, and then a couple of key components that we know that people are interested in. We are decided at this time to divide into 2 different cohorts, but in alphabetical order. So we would have a cohort A and a cohort B. Cohort A would be in school on Monday and Tuesday and virtual on Thursday and Friday. The cohort B will do the opposite. They will be virtual on Monday and Tuesday, and then report to school on Thursday and Friday. In hopes of maximizing instruction, we will be in session on Wednesday, and we will rotate cohorts for balances so that one is always in on the Wednesday and then the other cohort would be virtual. Students in our ELL and LLD program will attend school every day, and we know that we will also have a group of students that are opting for full-time remote learning, and they will just be considered virtual learners for the whole week. As I said before, we're having 4 periods a day, so we're breaking up our normal 8-period day just in 1 through 4 or 5 through 8, and these periods will rotate daily. As I stated earlier, we are looking for synchronous instruction, so our teachers will be able to stream what is going on in their class out to the people that are remote virtual learners. So that's why the instruction will be able to be synchronous. So the teachers will be teaching the people in their classroom as well as the people that are on remote learning for that day. From that, we know that we need to have PD to help everybody grow and get better with this. And that is why we're going to be taking advantage of those early dismissals. And we're going to be creating professional development that would, like it says here, to build capacity of virtual instruction and also to figure out good ways to enhance collaboration amongst the cohorts when you have one virtually and one in person. And now, Dr. Drew, you can go to the next slide.
And Ms. Scheiderman is going to speak through to this.
The daily staff schedule will be the same. There won't be any changes to that schedule. So the faculty and staff are working regular schedules, certificated faculty, instructional aides working 7:25 until 2:40, and support staff working their regular 8-hour day. As Mr. Libera mentioned, at 12:15 afterwards, there will be time for a lunch break for the employees, professional learning opportunities, time for extra help for students, possibly related services delivered at that time, and some other child study team activities. The first goal of the professional learning, to really state again what Mr. Libera already emphasized, is to focus on that instructional technology piece, which there are some resources available now through the IT department for employees, and we will be conducting new teacher orientation, the 2 PD days, as well as new teacher orientation, which I think I mentioned, and our 2 opening days of PD. So focusing really on that instructional technology piece to make sure everyone is equipped for the new instructional demands. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scheiderman. Now I'm going to ask Mr. Reamer, who is our Director of Special Services. She started with us July 1st. She is going to speak about critical area of operation number 1, general health and safety guidelines.
Good evening. So health and safety is one of our primary focuses on reopening. So with that being said, our employees will be receiving training on proper hand washing, how to properly wear your mask, our COVID-19 workplace guidelines, and how to respond to COVID-19. All of our staff and students will be wearing face coverings while in the building. Employees and students will be encouraged to wash their hands frequently. We will be limiting our use of shared objects. Our buildings and grounds have been putting in touchless hand sanitizing stations all over the buildings, particularly in the classrooms and in our entrances and exits. Any employee or student who are ill or feeling ill are advised to stay home and not enter the building. We are requiring our employees to wear their IDs so that everyone is visible to who's in the building, and students are required to have their IDs on them at all times.
Great. And I believe we're going back to Mr. Librera to talk about the first part of critical area of operation number 2, which encompasses classrooms, testing, and therapy rooms.
So in regards to the classrooms, what we have been doing is we've been going around with each classroom, seeing the classroom layout, understanding the possible numbers in each of possible enrollment for that class, and making sure that our desks will be positioned at least 3 feet from one another. We want to stress that in all instruction and passing time, students will be in masks, and we will have supplies in each classroom and in each opportunity or working space for students to clean their workspace upon departure and arrival. We are having our district engineer perform HVAC tests to make sure that there is proper airflow in all of our classrooms. And as I stated earlier, we are in the process of creating outdoor temporary facilities, and we think that there will be many uses of these temporary facilities. One is to stage the students before they enter the building in the morning, and that way we can decrease idle time of students in the building and also maximize the efforts of the cleaning so that it is proper when everybody begins instruction in the morning. Also use those for outside snacking areas, and also, when applicable, have certain disciplines that would benefit from outdoor spaces, use those for instruction.
Great, thank you, Mr. Rivera. I'm now going to turn it over to Mr. Sabino to talk about our therapy rooms and educational support services. Mr. Sabino is our Director of School Counseling.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So for this piece, we wanted to focus on both the therapy rooms, but also speak more broadly about our school counseling department, as well as our child study team offices, to what that would look like come September. So to continue with the theme and the requirement that all students and visitors will be required to wear face coverings at all times, visiting both those departments as well as the other spaces throughout the building. We are going to recommend strongly that all appointments are scheduled in advance so that, whenever possible, there will be events, as I'm sure many of you can think of, for both the child study team and the school counseling department when when visits will be have to be unplanned. But whenever possible, we would like to schedule those in advance to be mindful of the flow of the traffic in and out of those departments. Revisions to waiting procedures. We're going to certainly look to reframe what it looks like to wait for those staff members. So we're not having typical waiting rooms with individuals in close proximity to each other, and to facilitate 6-foot spacing recommendations. Contactless check-in for students. So they'll be continuing to reinforce the fact that the students are utilizing their ID badges whenever possible to check into these departments, so they're not having to utilize our Genesis system by typing it in to keep those contacts contactless. Additionally, we'll be utilizing partitions in the high traffic areas where appropriate. No students will be allowed to eat or drink in offices or common areas while visiting the departments. We're going to continue to utilize video conferencing, including Google Meet, for conferences with teachers and parents and guardians whenever possible, in addition to the presentations we will do through those departments. In addition, for group sizes may need to be decreased to ensure social distancing when doing therapy or group sessions, either with the child study team staff, the school counseling staff, the student assistant counselors, or with our additional mental health providers.
Thank you, Mr. Sabino. Ms. Dreamer, oh, I'm sorry. Before we get to her, I'm going to go to Mr. Stiles to talk about transportation.
Thank you, Dr. Jewett. And the first thing we had to do when we were talking about transportation was make sure we coordinated with our sending districts, which is always a challenge with busing, mainly because of the tiered system. But we were able to at least come as close as we possibly could to make this work. So the first thing we're looking to do with the high school students, and now that we have the hybrid schedule, we're permitting 25 students, and that takes place, you skip the first row, and then you go 2, 1, 2, 1 in the 3-seaters. And on the other side, in the 2-seaters, it's 1 all the way down. And continuing with the theme that you've heard, face coverings are required to be worn by students at all times. We are boarding the bus one at a time, going back first, back seats first, and then all the way up one at a time. And on the way out, they exit in the opposite order, and we have to do it single file. And again, continuing the theme of we're trying to eliminate the grouping of students. The windows will be cracked if they can. Obviously, if we were busing tomorrow, that would not happen. But yeah, so on the weather days where it's going to rain, that's the only problem we are going to have with that. But other than that, the windows can be open. And even with the rain, as long as it's not a deluge, you can pretty much at least crack those windows. In terms of our rules about eating and drinking, and that goes with the face coverings as well, we're going to be very strict about that. There will be no eating or drinking on the bus, as that would be an opportunity for the students to take that face covering off. And then the buses, we're working with the bus companies to deep clean the buses daily and touch spots, the key touch spots between routes. Next slide.
Oh, hold on.
I think I got 2.
Yep. Hold on. Here we go.
You're making me dizzy.
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, and actually connected to the transportation is the student flow, entry, exit, and common areas. So we're still developing protocols to stagger entrance into and exit the building. Generally, the group coming into the building is kind of staggered, but we're looking to utilize the outside areas that Mr. Librera mentioned before as a way to allow them to enter a space that's not in the building when we can look at them and make sure that we review if they have any symptoms or whatnot. We have over 350 signs that we've ordered, and we'll have them posted throughout the hallways, reminding students, again, the same theme: social distancing, hand washing, wear your face coverings. It's kind of important. Not only do we have these signs, but we as administrators, teachers, parents, constantly remind students, wash your hands, wear your face coverings, those kind of things. Again, we're trying to eliminate the gatherings in groups during hallway passing. We are going to have folks make sure we're watching over the students. And then obviously the requiring of the face masks or face coverings at all times during the hallway passing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Size. And so now we have Mr. Reamer.
I'll be talking about screening PPE in responses to students and staff presenting with symptoms. So the district will be providing 2 reusable face masks and a face shield to all of our staff. We are also looking at some of the reusable masks for certain teachers being the ones that are clear so that you can see your lips and do some lip reading for our students that need it. The nursing space will now be divided into 2 locations. One location is going to be for isolation in the 6-student area, and then the other location is for general nursing. We will be doing screening on a daily basis. Staff will visually screen students. We will also have students and employees having their temperature checks as they enter the building. Parents will be asked to fill out a screening questionnaire weekly and submit it through Genesis, and employees will be asked to complete another questionnaire weekly. Anybody who is presenting symptoms will remain in the isolation area of the nurse's office prior to going home. And then we will be in contact with our local health officials about next steps and contact tracing. Which leads to the next slide, which is contact tracing. So we, like I said, are working in collaboration with our local health department. So we will notify them if we have anyone who's presenting with symptoms of COVID-19. They will work with our school physician and our nursing staff to investigate the case. They will let us know if we need to identify other potentially exposed staff members or students, and then how to contact them and what the next steps will be, whether it will be isolation and or quarantine.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Reamer. Now I'm going to go back to Mr. Sties.
Yeah, this was probably the most challenging of areas for us because we're trying to add things to the building that would also not only handle this current pandemic, but also all scenarios. So the first couple things we kind of were able to do that. We were decreasing touch spots in places in the bathroom, the towel dispensers, the soap dispensers, the flushing mechanisms, and also classroom sanitizers, where we're adding a classroom sanitizer to each classroom, which is touchless. Those things will be valuable beyond this current pandemic. And then the second bullet point, where we talk about magnetic doors, and there we have many hallway doors that remain in the closed position. The reason we haven't in the past is because we have to tie them into the fire alarm, because if a fire happens, the doors have to be closed. So we're tying it into the fire alarm, and all the doors will be open pretty much all the time. And the reason being is it just will cut down the number of touch spots that the students will be touching. And then the other items are specific to this current pandemic. We have already purchased electrostatic, they're sprayers. So we've got 6 of those, and they thoroughly disinfect areas where needed. We are working with our custodial company to add 2 day shift workers. And then we are also working to come up with a specific schedule. Actually, we have a meeting tomorrow morning. So we will be putting that together for the board. And then for each classroom, we're buying large refillable, we already have those, these actually came in, large refillable wipes, buckets of wipes. And this is something that we wanted to do for each class period. We're still kind of working on whether it's going to be at the end of the class period or at the beginning of the class period. At the current time, we're saying end of the class period, but we're going back and forth on that one. But we want the students to wipe off the desk and then we'll just toss the towel into the trash. Again, it's something you can grab and you can just wipe. You don't have to touch anything else. And then we've already reviewed our HVAC system to determine the best airflow but we're going to have a detailed individual come in to do a more thorough review of the HVAC systems. We have 168 operational fans on the rooftops. They don't generate air conditioning and heat, they just generate the airflow throughout the building. Something that the board did in 2013 referendum, which added better airflow to the district. But we also have heating and ventilating, heating and air conditioning in many of the areas throughout the building. And those will be reviewed too with this engineer professional. That's it. Thank you.
Now I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Whrhs for the last 3 critical areas of operation.
So although this has meals written on here, we are not offering meals, but we are talking about a snack time, and that is a big differentiation for us. This time that we're allowing students to eat a snack is not a time for them to really be having a 3-course meal. This is something for nutritious sustenance that could be had in a quick fashion so that they could maintain their attention in their day in proper being fed and ready to go. Like I said earlier, this would be at the beginning or the end of time slot 3 each day. We are going to be creating 4 staged areas that we were going to be dividing the people that are in school that day and in each session so that we can thin out each crowd so that proper social distance can be maintained. Eating and drinking will be the only time that a removal of the mask is permissible. And as soon as that time they are completed, the mask should be affixed to its normal position. We are going to have students be able to pre-order items from kiosks. And what we will do is we will station those kiosks near the staged area where they are to go outside. As we spoke to earlier, it is crucial for students to be wearing their ID badges. And from this, we will be using their student IDs to purchase or to scan their pickup of their items so that we can limit the use of touchpads. The good thing also about running a split snack schedule is that we will have a gap of about 45 minutes in between the snack times. So that would afford us the opportunity to properly clean and sanitize that area for the next group that is coming in. And then we move on into physical education. We will not be having access to our locker room, so we intend to maximize the good weather that occurs in the beginning stages of the year and have as many outdoor classes as possible. We still would like to be creative with the lessons that we run, so in that they will not be changing into close. We will have to be cognizant of what activities that we are running that day when we are getting aerobic activity. Also, we will be looking where appropriate to use a flipped instructional model where the teachers will have the opportunity to work with the students about the skill in the class time, and then the extension would be the opportunity for the students to go perform that activity. When inclement weather happens and we have to be inside, obviously we will remain social distance and masked at all times there as well. And lastly, extracurricular activities and use of facilities. First and foremost, all outside companies that use our facilities will not be permitted until further notice. Co-curricular activities, we will be looking to extend those virtually and in person where applicable, and by analyzing the specific needs of the club and organization. For our extracurricular activities, we've already started our some activities have already started summer conditioning, and we have the opportunity to run this through August 28th. September 14th begins the start of the fall season. This is a different revised calendar issued by the NJSIA, and the competitive contest will begin on or after September 28th, depending on the activity or sport.
Thank you, Mr. Whrhs. So with regard to next steps, what you saw there are the highlights from the very detailed 70+ page plan that we have that we will be submitting to the NJDOE. Obviously, we need to communicate all of the different components of the plan to all stakeholders. So I'll actually be convening the communications team later this week so we can talk about the best way to do that, perhaps to chunk some of these different components so that we can draw attention to each of them, because it is certainly a lot of information. We do have to develop some board policies aligned to the reopening plan. as required by the DOE. And one of those policies will be with regard to the 100% virtual learning option that parents may select. So we need to outline the process for applying for that, what the timelines will be, and so that will be forthcoming in the next week or so. We do need to continue to plan for department-specific needs, specifically with regards to the arts, science, and physical education. Professional development for staff, as Ms. Scheiderman had mentioned. We have made preliminary plans for that, but we certainly need to now outline those in more detail and really set up a timeline for what's going to happen in the remainder of August and then through September. And that includes the transition from Zoom to Google Meet. As we've talked about, Google has upgraded a lot of their features so that they have a lot of the features they did not have that Zoom has. And obviously, as we use Google for our platform, for our learning and instruction, that is going to be the preferential platform for us to use. We do need to develop plans for our emergency drills, our fire drills, our evacuation drills. We did have administrators attend sessions with the DOE and the Office of Homeland Security on those, because those are going to be, obviously, they're going to look a little bit different in light of some of the requirements with regard to COVID. And then we also will be revising our visitor procedures. Currently, well, in the past, parents have come in to the main office to drop things off for their students. Over the summer, we have been utilizing the vestibule in the front of the building at the main entrance for people to drop things off. And then security will go out into the vestibule once people have left to retrieve the item. And so we will be putting a process similar to that in place. And if somebody does need to come into the building for an appointment, they are going to have to go through similar screening procedures that students and staff have to go through. So we will be working on that as well. So that is the entirety of the presentation. So I am going to now open it up to the board for questions and comments. And the presentation will be posted we should have it posted by the end of the day tomorrow at the latest on the district website. And obviously correspondence will be going out regarding this, but we'll get the presentation up there for anyone else who wants to review it. God bless you. Okay, so I'll turn it over to the board now for questions and comments. So Mr. Morrison? This, just for the public, this is just the board discussion piece. There will be public comment later, but this is not the public comment portion yet. This is just for the board.
Thank you, Dr. Jewett, and thank you to the entire administrative team for the presentation and the very thoughtful and comprehensive approach that you put forward. I have one question, either for members of the operations committee or for Mr. Stiles. Particularly as it relates to the HVAC system and ventilation. I understand that, according to the presentation, that there will be, you're going to have additional analysis done on those systems. I'm wondering if that will also include kind of an analysis of air change rates in our individual classrooms, and particularly those classrooms that may have lower levels of ventilation than maybe our traditional classrooms. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, so we've already reviewed the system with our engineers and our architect. So what we want to do, though, is to go into some of those classrooms with a specialist called a balancer. And they'll do exactly what you just said. They're going to look at the airflow in the room, the percentages of outside air that are coming into the room, just to make sure that what we have on paper and what we have in our system, in our tritium system, is actually occurring. In other words, that percentage of outside air is coming into that particular room. So we're gonna work on a random sample of rooms. Certain rooms we're gonna do just because, based on the level of activity and what type of things, like for example, a music room would probably need a little more. So that's something we got to look at a little bit more thoroughly. But yeah, so, and if we need to expand it, we will expand that testing.
And then kind of a follow-up to that, have you looked at any options for in if there are isolated cases where the air change rate is not what it needs to be, actually bringing in some additional filtration units that could augment what's happening so that you could get the air change rates up to a level that would be acceptable.
Yeah, thanks. That's exactly what our engineer has already discussed. So those are on the table. So basically in any area that's not efficient with the air coming into the room, we got to devise a plan that will help that meet that standard. Honestly, we're pretty confident that we will meet that standard, but the engineer is looking at alternatives just in the case where we may have a deficiency.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hayek, you had your hand raised, but it's not anymore. Did you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I just put it down. I had a quick question. So again, as Mr. Morrison said, thank you for your comprehensive and detailed plan and for those in the public breaking it down for us. So I understand a lot of it is to adhere to reducing capacities and lower the transmission rate. So with that in mind, I know the transportation said 25 would be the max for students in the bus. Could you just walk us through how the district is going to reserve seats for students that may want to take the bus and just the next steps for that?
Yeah, it's tricky. So we had a survey and we had about 65% of the parents said they would feel comfortable sending their kids on the bus in the morning, and then 75 in the afternoon, which is typically how it is. So how we're going to do that, we're working with our contractors and our transportation coordinator, and the parents, at least on the survey, supplied names, but we're going to basically go through the cohort with Principal Librera to see how that shakes out. So I think it's alphabetical, if I remember right. Yeah. So we're basically going to have to design those routes, and it's going to be the similar routes as they are now, Freddie. In other words, it's literally the same routes, but it's going to be half the kids, depending on the name. So if there's clusters, we have to work on those kind of things. But once we get this part all ironed out, then we're going to have to take a look at the actual names versus the routes we have already in place and try to make that work. We feel pretty confident that we are at the high school level. It's a little tougher on the elementary and middle school level. You do have a lot of parents, particularly in the morning, you do have a lot of parents dropping off and kids who drive. So that, the 25, I don't really see that as an issue for us. I think it's a little more of a challenge for the elementaries, to be honest.
Thanks, Freddie. Dr. Shabilsky.
Thank you, Dr. Jewett. First, thank you to you, the entire administration, all of the committees that were formed to go over all of the materials and come up with a plan. I think it's important for the students, the teachers, the parents, the administrators to understand, and I'm sure you do, that this is a very fluid situation and that we're constantly learning more information, and what has been presented is what we were required to do by the governor to have a reopening plan a month before school was to start. For those of you who have been watching the news, you can see that transmission rates have been going up over the past week in New Jersey. The governor even today has narrowed some of the flexibility that exists in terms of where masks are worn and how many people can be indoors. And it is potential that come September that we will find out that we cannot have in-class education at all. So this is the plan as of today, based on what we know, based on what we're required to present, but be prepared that this could change, and we are looking at all of the different possibilities and prepared to react to whatever facts may present themselves in the next month.
And Dr. Shabilsky, thank you for that. And along those lines, that is why we developed a plan where we can pivot from the hybrid model to an all virtual model. The synchronous part of the virtual instruction makes that much more feasible to do. And one of the key pieces of feedback we received last spring was that from both students and staff and parents was that they wanted more face-to-face time with the students, more real-time interaction with the students. And now that we have had time to plan that, and we will have time for professional development on that, that is one of the very significant changes to the plan for the fall. But it allows us to make that transition to 100% virtual learning for everyone should the need arise. So thank you for
But just on that point, I think it's important to also explain to everybody, if we go completely virtual, the PD is not going to stop.
Correct.
The PD would still occur in a virtual fashion if that's what's necessary, because the teachers, it's important for everybody to understand that the board supports continued professional development with the use of all the technologies available, so that we can have students engaged even in a virtual learning environment. I mean, synchronous is great, but it's still not being in the classroom, right? And so classroom engagement was also one of the main areas that came up in the surveys for the parents, that they were looking to make sure that the students were more engaged. And just synchronous learning, just in and of itself, doesn't create the engagement, right? So again, I just want everybody to be clear that even if we go to a completely virtual learning environment, that PD it will also be a huge part of our plan.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Mr. Morrison.
Yes, and I think and I agree. I think that the plan, the way that it's laid out and its ability to allow us to quickly shift to completely remote learning with minimal disruption, I think is one of the great, one of the beauties of this particular plan. I think that's, as we've reviewed it and thought about it, the flexibility, yet the ability to quickly move remotely and not have it disrupt instruction, I think is really, really important. That said, I think and I certainly agree with Dr. Chabelsky and Dr. Jewett as well about, September, the opening of school is a year from now in COVID time. And a lot of things can change. But I think one of the things that's important to know is that as it relates to the guidance that we have received from the state of New Jersey, from the governor and from the Department of Education, we do not have the option of opening completely remotely at this time. Now, think of it in terms of how they handle graduation. Everything kind of changed and changed and changed and changed, all the way up until we found out what it was that we could do with graduation to accommodate the needs of our students. The same thing is what we're seeing here, is that the information's changing, the guidance is going to change, and that even though we cannot put forward a fully remote strategy at this point in time, this plan has built one. And if the time comes that we need to execute against it, we will have that option to do it. But that's not a decision that we can make tonight, because we don't have the authority to make that decision from the Department of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Any other board members with comments or questions? Okay, Ms. Barone, that's it for that portion. You're muted.
Thanks. We're going to skip the committee reports portion of our agenda, as the committees were basically, all the board committees were learning about the reopening plan as we were going through it. And that was the main purpose of our committees over the last month, which we had many committee meetings as well. So the board was able to be involved in the planning in that way. In addition to, hearing it tonight. So the next portion of our agenda is the first opportunity for public comment. The first public comment period is limited to the agenda items for this meeting only. The second public comment period will be open to any topic. All comments are limited to 5 minutes. So in our virtual world here that we're still in, we will be, please use your raise your hand function, and you will be recognized by Dr. Jewett. And please state your name and where you're from. Please remember, especially with regarding the reopening plan, Dr. Jewett's going to take notes down and talk about, in terms of questions that everybody has, and then try to respond to them at the end of all the questioning, to the extent that she can, and doesn't have to, and there's certain things that maybe she would have to come back to us on. But this isn't, we're not having a conversation here. We want to hear all your comments and all your questions, and then we'll try to respond to as much as we can tonight. And if not, there will be a later period of time where we can provide you responses. Is that accurate, Dr. Jewett?
Yes, yes. Thank you, Ms. Verone. Okay, so I see it looks like most of you have figured out how to use the raise your hand function, which is great because that makes it very easy to run public comment. So Mr. Colabella, and I will unmute you so that you
if they could just state their names when they talk before they talk.
Yes. Okay.
Hello?
There you go. Yep, we can hear you, Mr. Colabella.
Okay, thank you very much. You've answered so many questions and done such a wonderful job. And my question is very self-centered to the arts department and maybe the science department and maybe even the phys ed department, which is no doubt an ongoing situation, but considering these departments' use of equipment and materials, as opposed to, say, an English or social studies class, is there a plan for the cleaning and the maintenance of such equipment or supplies?
Okay, and as Ms. Verone said, what I'll do is I'll make note of the questions and then I will make a statement at the end of all the public comment and answer the ones that I can.
That's all I can ask. I can't ask you to give an immediate response. It's just a thought. And
no, and I appreciate that. This is really helpful. I just don't want, it's always awkward when folks ask questions and we don't answer. So I just want you to make sure everyone understands.
I totally understand that. I wouldn't press
Great.
for an answer.
Thank you so much, Vince. It's nice to hear from you.
Thank you very much for everything.
Okay, Ms. Gilliam.
Okay, good evening. I'm Jacqueline Gilliam and I teach Spanish at Watchung Hill. I will start by saying that the plan that you've put out is very comprehensive, and but I do have a few concerns, and I do appreciate the fact that it is fluid and it could change at any given moment. I do know that. I feel like we have more than a few examples, that of things and of attempts to open school with in-person instruction. As recently as a few days ago, we have Mississippi, and I know Mississippi's pretty far, but as soon as they did the in-person instruction, their percentage of infection went up, and school buildings, the issue that I have with school buildings is that they're enclosed with walls, and every classroom has a different level of ventilation. And I do appreciate the fact that you spoke to the ventilation. But then they also had an example in Georgia where there were 260 teachers that gathered for professional development in planning. And for us, that would be August 31st. We're going to plan in person to open up. And they tested positive, and the students weren't there. These were the staff, and then of course, everybody knows about the camp where the campers weren't wearing masks, and this was outside with ventilation. So to my way of thinking, these campers were outside with no masks, running around in the open air, but there must have been a lot of touching and, having fun as children do, and this was outside. So that's my concern, the fact that we know COVID-19 is airborne. And so as you were going through the plan for reopening, you said 3 feet, and that just gave me such pause when up until now, everything we've heard was 6 feet, 6 feet. And so when you say 3 feet, now I'm really scared. And then the fact that we are so at risk. I mean, 80% of Americans live in a county where if school were to open up right now, and you had 500 students and staff, one person is going to walk through the door asymptomatic. Asymptomatic to me means without any symptoms. That means a fever is a symptom. That on day one, COVID-19 is going to walk through our doors. At least 2 people will walk in asymptomatic. So I'm really afraid, and I mean, I'm not being led by emotion. I am reading everything. I'm following the updates, and I'm reading so that I'm not moved by only emotions, because if you watch the news, you'll be moved by emotions. So I'm reading to try to educate myself, you know, and I understand that right now COVID is raging in other parts, but for us to think that that's apart from us, we're all interrelated. So in some way it will affect the Northeast, you know, and our numbers are ticking up. And now I'm going to get a little more emotional and say that I never signed on to be a sacrificial lamb in this pandemic, okay? Because during the regular school year, in any given school year, we go through training, shelter in place, you know, and I'm even visualizing this as I say this to you. We, in the event of, you know, an active shooter, and we lock our classrooms, we close the doors, the lights go off, and the students are shuffled into the corner that's furthest from the view of the door. And I'm going to tell you, I say to my students, okay, now let's practice the shut up game. And they love it when I say that, and they're quiet as a church mouse. And at those moments, in my mind, I ask myself, what would I do if a shooter came into the room? And I have to tell you, I feel like a mother hen because I'm very protective of my students. But this is not that. This is totally different from that. And so I'm really protective of my own life. And on a very, very personal note, I have to tell you that I'm aware, fully aware, that as an African American, I am 3 times more likely not to survive COVID than my white counterpart. And not just because of a pre-existing condition, but because of systemic racism if I show up at an emergency room. So I don't want to make this about me, but I'm telling you, from A to Z, I have many, many concerns about this. And so I do appreciate the fact that this is fluid, and at any given moment, we might be told that we won't, you know, have in-person instruction. My hope is that we don't, and that hopefully by maybe into the 2 or 3 months, then we can go through a hybrid, and then hopefully the celebration will be when we can all meet. And I'm gonna stop now, but I'm gonna say thank you for everyone who was on the team, because you obviously put a lot of hard work and you've covered all the bases. And I'll stop now. Thank you for giving me my time.
Thank you, Jackie. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I want to be able to give everybody some time to speak. So I just want to remind everyone that is a 5-minute limit. Not that I want to cut anybody off, because I think this is the ability for the staff and the public to provide their comments. But there are a lot of people that may want to speak. I think there's lots of hands a lot of people have their hand raised. So thank you.
Okay, Mr. O'Reilly.
Hi, thank you. Greg O'Reilly, Warren Township. I just want to say, first, thank you to you and the administration for the time and effort that you have dedicated throughout the summer so far in the reopening plan. It's certainly one of the most difficult yet important tasks that we can accomplish as a learning community. And, you know, we appreciate the opportunity to hear the plan for the first time and offer our questions as important stakeholders in the Watchung Hills learning community. We do not oppose the reopening plan or reopening the school. We understand that in-school instruction offers the best learning experiences and academic gains under normal circumstances. And we want to return to the school. We want our students to come back and feel confident that they are safe to learn and engage with the wonderful classes and activities that we offer. And we want things to return to normal. However, we know that things are not returning to normal. Cases of COVID-19 are rising again in New Jersey. The state still struggles to make testing available and timely to allow contact tracing to be its most effective, and there is still no vaccine. Normally in August, students are focusing on vacations and who is in their classes while teachers are finishing new lesson plans and bulletin boards. Now they are worried about how to wear a mask all throughout the day and how to ensure the safety of their families and themselves. Throughout the summer, I listened to members of the faculty and staff every day who struggled with the uncertainty of what the next year will look like. They are scared that the coronavirus will spread throughout the school and hurt their colleagues and their students. They feel unprepared and untrained for how to work under a hybrid model during a pandemic. They are anxious, not knowing how they will manage their own childcare while working. They feel lost about how we will respond if a student or a faculty member presents symptoms or is diagnosed, and there are so many other worries. During July, members of the Watchung Hills Regional Education Association worked with the administration on the reopening teams, and we reflected the input and the concerns of the faculty and staff on many different issues concerned with reopening the school in a safe and responsible way. We provided many questions each week, some of which were answered, but many of which still remain unanswered. Much of the progress was slow and focused on large issues like lunch and transportation and a hybrid schedule, while many questions we brought to the table related to safety issues and practical operations of the hybrid teaching were sidelined for later. The number of faculty and staff attending this meeting demonstrate the sincere anxiety that they are experiencing and the lack of response they've received to those concerns. Our two general concerns rest on how much academic gains can actually be developed for students under such a stressful model of work, how safe this working environment will be for students and for staff, for all of the families connected to Watchung Hills. Watchung Hills Regional High School is a top-rated school and a wonderful place to educate our students and a caring community to raise our families. And one of the most important factors that makes Watchung Hills so successful is that we have one of the best faculties in the state. Any reopening plan that has a chance of being successful is going to rest squarely on your faculty and staff having confidence in this plan. Your faculty and staff will be the ones implementing the reopening plan. Your faculty and staff will be the ones sacrificing to ensure that our students get one of the best educations in the country. Your faculty and staff feel like they're not being heard and they're scared. It is time for the administration and the Board of Education to not just listen to your faculty and staff, but respond meaningfully to their concerns and input. We believe that there are substantive actions that the administration and Board of Education can take that can strengthen this plan, both in supporting more substantial academic gains for our community's children and in supporting the safety of our faculty and their families. I encourage all of our members to feel free to ask questions that they feel that they have of this plan and to offer their valuable input so that we can make a stronger plan. The question that I have is why there has been no development of working remotely from home, those faculty, childcare issues, and family members who are at higher risk of complications with COVID-19. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. O'Reilly. One question I'm going to ask folks who would like to make a public comment is to please make your screen name a portion of your name rather than an expression or something else so that I can call on you by name. So if you do want to get called on, please just make your screen name, you know, it can be just your first name, your first and last name, but please make it a name. Okay, Ms. Larson.
Hi, good evening. Happy Monday. I'm joining you tonight to voice concern for the safety of the teachers, the paraprofessionals, the staff, the administration, and the students of Watchung Hills. This summer, I have observed the students of Watchung Hills and rising Watchung Hill freshmen violating the CDC guidelines for appropriate social distancing and mask wearing during the pandemic. Sadly posted all over Facebook are brag posts about backyard gatherings, beach outings, sports team group photos, including Watchung Hills sports teams, and graduation parties. It seems as if every Snapchat and Instagram post are flooded with images of a carefree, living my best life photo. This places the teachers and all staff potentially at risk upon the return to school this fall. Many of our teachers may be in a risk group without any student knowing or caring about the consequences. Teachers with elderly parents, teachers that are close to retirement, those with newborns, medical challenges and underlying medical conditions, or any of our disabled staff might easily be exposed by a carrier without any symptoms whatsoever. I had hoped that each family would encourage their teens to practice social distancing so we can avoid a second wave of infection and hospitalization or fatality of COVID-19. But unfortunately, that is rarely the case. As a scientist, I would like to suggest that each student provide COVID-19 testing results before returning to school this fall. While students may not be in the biggest risk group, our teachers certainly are, and they have been outstanding during last spring's virtual learning. And I would hate for anything to happen to any one of them. I know that we have a teacher shortage, having been a substitute teacher and science teacher myself before returning back into science research. I know that we don't have enough subs, probably on a weekly basis, to cover anybody that is out, but certainly nobody qualified or highly qualified to handle any of the inclusion rooms or LLD rooms. And I would like you to consider having a more stringent policy for returning for in-person education. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brodsky.
Hi, I'm Lee Brodsky, English teacher at Watchung Hills. And in listening to the reopening plan, there was a lot of focus on scheduling, and you're absolutely right. I can see the transition between the hybrid model and a virtual model really seamlessly. But my question is specifically for teachers, what are the duties going to be? Because, you know, I'm listening to the bus route and where students are going to be and the procedures for snack. And I mean, even in normal times, bathrooms, you know, kids are always crowding in the bathrooms. So how are we monitoring that with regards to social distancing? How are we keeping our eyes on the hallways without adding more bodies into the hall? So that's my question.
Thank you. Ms. Patel.
Hey, I'm Heather Patel. I teach physics at the school. I had a couple questions about the policy. I appreciate that you are making a model that is following the state's guidelines. I personally was hoping for virtual for my own situation, but based on the model that was presented, a passing period of 5 minutes does not seem quite long enough, considering how jammed the hallways get, even with half the amount of students. Why is it okay for staff to eat at school, but not the students? So if the students have a half day, maybe the adults should also go home and eat and then continue the rest of the day virtually. In terms of classroom engagement, I know I personally am going to be kind of terrified sitting in the front of the classroom, not being able to go near my students. And I can be very engaging on a video call. I think that that is something that will be inhibited by the safety precautions and the overall fear of being in the classroom. Just one more thing. I personally hit a couple of the high risk things. I do not qualify for ADA accommodations. And I'm nervous. So I'm trying to figure out if there are any accommodations for teachers or staff who are high risk. Since students have a virtual option, maybe teachers should too. And because we're going back, the high school students are going to be in school for 2 to 3 days for a half day. My 3-year-old and my 10-month-old are going to be in daycare 5 days a week, full time. And I understand it's my responsibility to find childcare for my kids, but I'm scared, and I don't know how that makes sense. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Patel. Ms. Blake?
Good evening, and thank you so much, everyone, for all of your work. My name is Gwen Blake. I'm one of the student assistance counselors at Watchung Hills. And I feel like I need to take a breath after listening to Heather. This is very emotional. Just thinking about coming back into the building with everyone. On one hand, so anxious to get back to all the people, all of your that I'm seeing, all of the students, especially the freshmen coming up. You know, it's always such a wonderful part of September is greeting them and getting to know them. As a mental health counselor in the school, I have a lot of concerns.
Teachers
listening to the
are
plan.
crying.
They're
crying on this line.
I'm sorry?
Because.
Oh, thank you. I know you've been painstakingly working at making this as close to the requirements of the state as possible and trying to make it work for our community, because we have a lot of students. We're a unique community. We're a wonderful community at Watchung Hills. As a SAC counselor, I don't know if Kevin's here, but you know, we receive a lot of students coming into our offices who are in very heightened emotional states. That's our job. That's why we're placed in the school. Our jobs are very important. And I realize at the moment I don't have a physical office because it was part of the library. And it's a couple of walls and some wires at this very, very point in time. But, you know, my space in particular, very small and very difficult to get any distance in that size of a room. With students coming in, masks or no masks, 3 feet when someone's having a panic attack is not appropriate amount of space. And there is no safety offered to me or the student if I should be asymptomatic and be carrying COVID. So there's a concern that I would implore you to look at. And it's not just me, you know, the other SACs, guidance counselors, the psychologists, caseworkers, social workers, and the nurses also. They see students who are also in heightened emotional states throughout the day. And this could happen several times a day, depending on what's going on. So there's one thing that I would ask you to consider. And I'm also wondering, and I think I'm echoing what a few other people said, is wondering what the benefit is of keeping faculty in the building till 2:40, when we also could leave the building, not be around each other. This sounds terrible because I really do love my coworkers, but I don't want to be around them right now. I want to be able to do my job and then go home and continue doing my job from a safe distance. I don't want to be in conference rooms. I don't want to be collaborating or doing PD in a room full of other people. You know, even at 6 feet, if you're sustained within a closed room, we really can't guarantee that. And I haven't heard anything in the reports or the news things that I've read that support any sustained contact, even at 6 feet. So there are some concerns. And as far as the busing is concerned, it just kind of popped in my mind as Tim was describing all the efforts that we will be making to keep the students safe on the buses. We still are going to have kids fiddling with their masks and touching their masks. And then there's going to be contact because every single one of them touches the seats as they're walking up and back from the buses. I'm sure you've all done it yourself in the buses. So then there's going to be contact from kids touching their masks who could have COVID germs on them, touching the seats. Another kid's behind them is going to touch that and then end up touching their face if they haven't washed their hands quickly enough. So I know there's no 100% solution, and everything that you've been trying to put in place, you know, you're trying so hard to cover everything, but I can't say that, and I'm sure you can't either, that we're covering all the bases. So those are some concerns that I have, and I think I'm probably up to my time now. So I'm going to say thank you so much again for your time, for your ears, for listening, and for being available to us as your faculty and staff to hear our concerns so we can join in to our September plans as a team. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Blake. Ms. Zhu?
Hi, thank you very much, Dr. Jewett. Thank you. I would like to thank you and all the other members who participated in the detailed planning for the reopening. I think putting the safety of all the students and staff as first priority is surely the right thing to do, and I really appreciate that. My question is related to the sorry, the virtual learning. So I think I heard Mrs. Morris mentioned about the virtual live remote learning is not all possible. So I would like to, let's say, use math lesson as example. I'd like to know what is the reason that the math lesson cannot be live, whether it's the hybrid or complete remote learning in the fall. What if we cannot go live? Is that due to the technical difficulties or the budget constraints or other challenges that we are not aware of as of now?
You know what, I'll go ahead and just clarify that in the middle of the presentation so it doesn't confuse anyone else, but all virtual will be all synchronous instruction. So
Okay.
Students participating virtually will be participating live in their classes, just virtually.
So that means it'll be live streamed. So everybody's clear what's that, you know, while the students are in the classroom, the students that are at home are going to be also seeing and hearing the same thing.
Okay, and that will happen for all the lessons every day, like 5 days a week for the core lessons that is possible.
Correct. Correct.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Finneran.
Hi, thank you very much for listening, and again, for all the hard work everybody has been doing. I just wrote down a couple concerns that I've had that I'll go over quickly. One being the HVAC system. That is my really biggest concern. I work in a windowless classroom where there's already dirt going up onto the ceiling tiles, and not testing every room gets me very uncomfortable. And I was wondering, will we see which rooms were tested? Because I think every room which is compromised, all windowless classrooms and others, that they need to be all tested because they're all different parts of the building. The other thing is, will we have teachers also get plexiglass around our desks or something like that? And the other thing was, somebody else already said, how are we really going to do professional development? I'm scared to go back and then all of a sudden I'm going to sit into an auditorium and I'm told if you're inside more than 8-10 minutes, it's not a good thing. So maybe we can do that outside. The other thing is, I just want to make a comment. I got my teeth cleaned, and when I went and got my teeth cleaned, the hygienist had on an N95 and then the surgical blue mask over it and a face shield. And I could not understand a word she said. And believe you me, that's the way I'm coming into work. Like if I could wear a hazmat suit, I would. So it's going to be hard for the students to even understand us if we have our masks on doubly. And I mean, I have a loud voice, so I'm really not that concerned for me. However, that is going to be a problem that kids not understanding what you're saying. And the last thing is, of course, the HIPAA laws. A school around here, a football coach, canceled all practices because they're not being told who has COVID and who doesn't. So as teachers, we'll never know who has COVID and who doesn't. And that's a pretty scary thing. Like everything's a big secret, and I believe in the HIPAA laws, but during the pandemic, we're never going to know. And that's going into the unknown. And finally, the last thing, the live streaming of the classroom, is that going to be set up, or are we going to have to use our laptop, which we need for other things, or are we just going to have to be live streaming all the time, or will we have another device in our classroom that will do the live streaming automatically? Thank you very much for listening, and I wish everybody the best, and thank you for everything you all doing.
Thank you, Mrs. Finneran. Mr. Appel.
Hello, how is everybody doing? Okay, good. I know everybody's muted, so I won't ask that question again. I just have some questions, mostly to do with how we're going to manage some of this stuff as we go back. I'm super excited to try and get back to this. I know my friends and my colleagues, some of them are really nervous about that, and I absolutely understand that. But I just want to ask my question. So my first question is, to what level and who needs to quarantine on a positive test of a student? Is it just going to be the other students? Is it just going to be in his classes, or is it going to be exponential throughout everybody that came in contact with that student? Two, what's going to be the policy for students who refuse to wear masks? Okay, if I have a student who refuses to wear a mask in the hallway and then he tries to come into my class, what is it that as a teacher I'm allowed to do? Okay, I think that's an important thing that we have done in advance. Okay, are we going to allow subs who substitute in different schools come and then sub in our school the next day? Right, that seems like an additional sort of dangerous sort of threat. You know, I don't mean threat, but, you know, just an additional danger having subs going in and out of our school on a daily basis. Can you clarify what the maximum number of students is going to be in class in person at any one time? Okay. How are you going to mandate attendance for distance learning? And if you're going to do that, how are you going to do that? Okay. I did have a concern that you said that we needed 6 feet of distance in the waiting areas, but only 3 feet in the classroom. And 6 feet seems to be the CDC guidelines. Why is it different in a waiting area versus in a classroom? I have one more question. Okay. Oh, 2 more questions. Okay. Who is going to supervise snack time? Is that going to be a duty for teacher? And are they going to volunteer for that duty? Or are they going to be required to do that? That seems like a little bit of an extra hazardous thing. And somebody else mentioned about the 25 kids on a bus. Are you expecting the bus driver to supervise those students to make sure they're staying socially distanced? Or is there going to be supervision on the bus so the bus driver can concentrate on driving the bus? Thank you for listening. I appreciate all of your time, and you know I will yield back all the rest of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Appel. Mr. Santucci.
Yes, good evening. This is Mike Santucci from Watchung. I'll keep my question brief. I know you guys are going to meet further on this subject, but do you have any tentative plans for classes such as the music and art? These are classes in which it's usually essential that entire classes meet in person. So what are the tentative plans for that? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Shanahan.
Abby. Hi, how are you? Thanks for having us. Abby had a question as well, but I have a quick question. I guess mine was, I was wondering if there was any thought to given to if we were unable to open fully. Another parent had mentioned to possibly just live streaming periods 1 through 8 for the whole day with teachers in their classroom, so they aren't seeing other teachers. They can just go to their classroom, work from school, and then the kids could be live as if they were in school, the entire class online. So that was my question. Abby had a quick question as well. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Abby Shanahan. I'm a rising senior. And I had a question about the live virtual periods. So how are the classrooms going to be set up? Because from personal experience, the teachers' computers, like quality for camera wasn't that good. So I wasn't sure how we're going to be able to see the board. And are there going to be cameras, microphones, and how does that protect the privacy of the students that are in the class? I also was wondering how the rotating cohorts will work for underclassmen athletes who can't make it back to school for practice without like busing. And I was wondering if senior early leave is just not going to happen anymore, because and even then, like the early leave would be in the cafeteria. So is that going to be closed? Are we going to be assigned different rooms? And are students supposed to wear like gym clothes to school if we can't change? Like, is gym attire like still supposed to be like athletic clothes? Yeah, so those are my questions, and thank you. And my heart goes out to all the teachers. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bird.
Good evening. My name is Angela Diorio Bird. I'm the choir director at Watchung Hills. I'd first like to say thank you to the administration for all of their hard work in generating this plan. I know this is more centered towards the arts, But in terms of class sizes, I know this year I'll be teaching a class of 65 students. Even if that's evenly cut in half, I can't have that many students social distance in my classroom. I have no windows and my room has very poor ventilation. How will situations like this be addressed in terms of social distancing for larger sized classes? In addition, singing is one of the most dangerous activities you can partake in right now. I'm trying to plan, but I'm not quite sure where to go from here in terms of what I'm actually teaching. I know I'm not alone in sharing these anxieties of going back as both a working parent and a teacher dedicated to our students. I'm truly concerned for my family and my students. I have to send my son to daycare full time, which is a tremendous financial burden. In the fall, because my parents are high risk, can't watch him. I won't be able to see my parents. I can't take any sort of leave under the Coronavirus Act because I took a maternity leave last year and can't take another one until November because the law says you have to wait a year to take another leave. Under all of this stress and anxiety I'm experiencing, and I'm sure many others are as well, how safe will this be for our dedicated faculty and staff? If we can't partake in indoor dining, how can we even think about resuming school? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Bird. Ms. Grunther.
Okay, good evening, everybody, and thanks for this opportunity. I know how hard everyone has worked on the plan, and that's what the governor asked, is for schools to submit a plan, and you guys have done a great job putting something together. My concern is along the lines of Jackie Gilliam, who spoke, was one of the first speakers. Every time we've seen schools open so far, and I'm sure many of you, like us, are monitoring very carefully what's happening around the country, you know, within a week, sometimes 2 weeks, they have to close again. So my question is this. We all are thinking that if New Jersey, the cases rise and rise, and then we find ourselves with Governor Murphy saying everything's going virtual, that solves the problem for everybody. However, in other parts of the country, there are school districts who have already communicated that they plan to open virtually and wait, whether it be for a vaccine, whether for the curve to flatten, whatever. My question to the board and administration is this. Would you please be able to reassure us that whatever Governor Murphy does, you will consider opening virtually, even if the state does not, even if the state doesn't require you to do it? Would you still, if you feel it's dangerous, and if your community, your students, your parents, your teachers feel overwhelmingly that it is not safe, would you please be able to consider and even commit to opening virtually? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cottrell. Oh, she's still there? Ms. Cottrell, are you there? Let me see. Were you having trouble unmuting, perhaps? There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that.
No,
thank you so much, Dr. Jewett, and thank you to the board and everyone that was involved in doing all this hard work in the last month. I'm going to be really brief. I just have some questions and some thoughts in response to the presentation that you guys put together. My first is it echoes things that other people have commented on. I'm a little concerned about the students being 3 feet apart from one another. I know, to my knowledge, the CDC has said that 3 feet is okay if you're wearing masks for short periods of time. I think they said 10, 15 minutes or something like that, but we are going to be in class for an hour at a time. My intent is to put a 6-foot radius of tape around my desk. So I am not going to be within 3 feet of others, and I don't think my students should be 3 feet from each other as well. Another concern that I have is in line, I think it was Ms. Finneran mentioned the fact that Mr. Stice mentioned that a random sampling of the rooms would have their HVAC system tested to make sure that it's mixing the adequate amount of outside air. I know the minimum amount of outside air is supposed to be 15%. I've been in a lot of these rooms covering other teachers. My room, I'm lucky enough to have windows, but I'll tell you, it smells like gym socks. And I've complained about a moldy smell, stagnant air, very poor airflow on many occasions in the 9 years that I've worked there, and not very much has been done. Many of my science colleagues have rooms that have no windows. So I really personally don't feel that it's adequate to test a random sampling of rooms. There are different HVAC systems from different generations in all parts of the building, and I think that all of the rooms need to be looked at. Another concern that I have is that the CDC has said that for workplaces to safely bring their employees back, all the HVAC systems should be retrofitted with HEPA filters. Now, I realize that that is a significant expense, but you know, that is what the CDC is recommending, and I do think that's something that should be considered. Finally, oh, okay, so I'm so sorry. I have a little scratch sheet here. Someone mentioned the daily cleaning staff would be increased by 2 people a day. Again, I have read that high touch areas and common areas should be sanitized hourly. And that's the CDC that I've read that from. And they're lovely people, but the current crew that we have cleaning the classrooms does not do an adequate job, at least in my wing. So my concern is that by increasing the daily staff for the entire school by 2, I don't really understand how we're going to have adequate disinfection going on all the time. Something that others have not brought up, and I'm not sure if everyone's aware of this, but the CDC has also suggested that COVID can be spread through fecal material, and that when toilets are flushed, they ought to be covered. I know that the ladies' room in my wing has windows that I don't think they open. It's got no heat in the winter, it's got no air in the summer, and there are no covers on any of the toilets. So I'm wondering if that is something that anyone has addressed. And then finally, I do have concerns, and I just would like to know the rationale, please, behind why teachers are being asked to stay until 2:40. I can tell you that I do not intend to eat or drink in my classroom, and that's, you know, nor do I intend to eat or drink in a common room. I'm going to be going down to my car to do that. And I know a lot of other teachers will be doing the same. I think that people would feel some degree of relief at being able to leave the building at noon when the students do, go home, throw your clothes in the wash, take a shower, and eat and drink in an environment that they know is safe. And then finally, the fact that students are being offered the opportunity to be 100% virtual, I think that that's fabulous. I do wish there was some accommodation like that for faculty who live with people who are at high risk. I have a daughter who's immune compromised. I have a husband who's 65 years old. I have parents who are both very elderly and are not in fabulous health, and I'm not going to be able to see them the entire school year. I do wish there was some room for conversation for faculty who have loved ones who are with high-risk situations. And that's all I've got. So thank you very, very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Ms. Triong.
Hi, I'm Tiana Trong. I teach Italian at Watchung Hills, and a lot of my questions were already addressed earlier. But one thing that I wanted to mention that really concerns me is the fact that 3 feet of spacing was mentioned in the presentation for the amount of space between students. I personally fear of bringing something home to the high-risk people that I live with. And I also fear for the safety of my students being around myself and others in such a close proximity. Another question I had was teacher duties that's been brought up a number of times. How are they going to be assigned? What will they look like? I also wanted to ask about like a deep cleaning procedure that's going to happen in the building. I know that it was mentioned that students would wipe down their areas when arriving and departing the classroom, but is there a procedure in place of how the classroom will be, or how the school will be cleaned each day? I know it was mentioned that they'll increase cleaning staff, but if I also remember correctly, the school took an initiative to use more green cleaning products, and I'm just curious if these products are proven to kill the virus and are, I guess, adequate enough. I also had another question regarding student masks, and I believe this was already brought up. However, will this be written in the student handbook that masks are mandated? Will there be disciplinary action for students that don't want to wear the mask or are being defiant about wearing it. And I think that's all of my questions. And I wanted to thank everyone for all of their hard work during this difficult time.
Thank you. Mr. Binicow.
Hi, so it's actually Mrs. Binicow.
Oh, Mrs. Binicow.
Sharing the computer. I hope everybody's okay. This is Cassie Binicow. I'm one of the school social workers on the child study team. And I would just like some clarification of which staff are going to be responsible for visually screening the students. Just because I think the majority of us aren't like medically qualified to be making kind of medical decisions like that. And then also, just a question, and maybe I just kind of didn't totally hear this part, but I think one of the slides said that related services would be provided after the students have left, which is confusing to me because I know my related services, or the related service that I provide, I need the students with me, so it seems like I would be providing it virtually anyway. So I guess the same kind of sentiment that people are saying, I'm a little unclear about why we have to be in the building longer than the students. And again, just the concern with having a son in daycare for the whole day, if we could go get him earlier too, and all that stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Nikki.
Oh, oh hi. Oh.
We can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Sorry, thank you. It's actually Nikki's husband, Steve Tor. I just had a couple of quick things.
I'm sorry, can you state your name and where you're from, please?
Yeah, so Steve Tor in Warren Township.
Did Mr. Stiles, did you get that name?
I did not.
Can
Sorry,
you say your name again?
Stephen Tor, Warren Township.
Okay. Did you say Tool? What was your last name?
Toor.
Thank you. I'm sorry. We just need it for the minutes. Thank you.
So just a couple of quick things, because I don't want to repeat too much of what other people have said. But firstly, thank you for the hard work. I guess it's a pretty bad time for everybody, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing. Fully support the plan, or 98% of it. I was very pleased to hear that Governor Murphy talk about mandated mask wearing today. And I think we should recognise that it's not just the initial disease and the recovery itself, but I think what we're seeing now is lots of quite bad medical events happening subsequent to that are unrelated to a respiratory condition. So, and on that basis, I think it's important that we protect our kids and our teachers and every other staff member in the school. So I would suggest reconsidering the 3-foot rule. I think, or the 3-foot directive. I think 6 foot's probably not enough, but it's practical, and there's only so far you can go. But as a lot of other people said, I think 3 foot is not appropriate. And then the only comment I wanted to make is I think that I've had a few comments about how do teachers manage a situation where pupils themselves become potentially disruptive or are not willing to adhere to things like mask wearing, etc. For my part, my son's just entering the school actually in the next academic year. I think at the end of the day, we have a duty of care to the staff and the faculty and to our kids. And if kids are not prepared to adhere to the rules that are in place for theirs and other safety, then you should kick them out of school, or at the very least suspend them and bring their parents in and explain that that's not acceptable behavior. Anyway, as I said, I don't want to repeat too much of what others have said, but I appreciate your time and your willingness to listen. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. And thank you. We apologize in the beginning for not being able to hear you. Thank you. Ms. Badaloro.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. It's good to see some faces. My name is Jana Badaloro. I teach English, and thank you so much for allowing all of us to come on here. I know it's a long night for you, and it's not so fun. I had a quick question about the presentation. I might have misunderstood, so forgive me if I did, but about an outdoor class, having classes outdoors. First of all, I'm concerned about the safety of that from a active shooter situation? How are we going to ensure that we are safe out there? But pair that with, I realize I'm going to be teaching kids who have opted to stay home. How am I going to be able to do that if I'm bringing my class outside to be safe and have the ventilation, but how am I going to reach those kids? So that, you know, it sort of feels like a little bit of a contradiction, and how are we going to address that? Just making sure everybody is safe. So thank you again for all your hard work.
Thank you. Ms. Corrigan.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you again, Dr. Jewett, and the rest of the reopening committee for all of your hard work. I share most of the concerns of my colleagues about returning to campus, and I don't want to be repetitive, but I do just quickly want to say that I have a very high level of anxiety about returning to the classroom. And I understand that our hands are tied right now, but I just wanted to emphasize the fact that other countries have not reopened schools with the levels of community transmission found in the United States. Additionally, in the United States, we just have insufficient testing and limited contact tracing. We also now know that older children, high school age children, are more likely to transmit at levels similar to adults. So, you know, the thought of returning to campus in a month or so is just terrifying to me. My question that I wanted to ask, and forgive me if you addressed this in the PowerPoint, I would like to know more information about the protocol if someone is detected as COVID positive. I'm not 100% clear on what the protocol is. I heard something, but I don't know if it's true, that it would only be the COVID positive student and those that he or she came in contact with who are exhibiting symptoms that would be forced to be quarantined. So my question to you is, how are we going to prevent asymptomatic spread?
So I can speak to that at the end. Yeah, that is not, what you had just said is not accurate, and I will get into a little bit more detailed discussion of that.
Okay. Because as we all know, you know, 81% of people who test positive for the virus are asymptomatic. So like if we're not closing down the school, how are we going to contain the virus? What about all the other students that this, you know, individual who tested positive interacted with? If they're asymptomatic, they could potentially, you know, spread the virus to other students and faculty who might have a more extreme reaction and who could, you know, possibly die. So that was, you know, my main question, this issue of containing the virus and what we're going to do about those who are asymptomatic. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Egley, I apologize if I said that incorrectly.
Good evening, how you doing? First off, I want to thank you for everything you've done. I know this has been very difficult on your part in the planning process. I'm actually a parent.
Can you actually state your full name and where you're from?
Sure, I'm Marie Hartlieb. I'm from Greenbrook, New Jersey. I have an incoming freshman. My concerns are that you have the students at 3 feet versus 6 feet. I understand that the American Pediatric Association allows for 3 feet, which allows for your increase in population compared to the middle school and elementary schools. But I'm very concerned with spread, asymptomatic. I'm also concerned with the synchronized education when they come to the virtual aspect. Are the teachers going to be given extra staff support to help with the tech side of this while they're trying to simultaneously teach the kids inside the classroom? Are they because they, you know, they have Go Guardian, they have Google Meets. Are the Google Meets going to be recorded in case there's a tech issue in Greenbrook? A lot of times with Optimum, we get dropped. I have 4 children in different schools, and with myself working as well, if we are all doing a Google Meet at the same time, somebody will get dropped. And that's a serious concern, especially when my child is in high school and their education is extremely important. My other concern is attendance. You know, if he's in a class where there is a positive case, what is going to be the protocol? What's the protocol for staff that come in contact with a child? Have you been talking to your staff about what this protocol will be? It's very concerning to me. The other concern I have, and because the presentation wasn't given to us prior to the meeting, is there were previous issues with security, so active shooter concerns. If you're going to have open doors, are open doors all the time? Is it just switching classes? Because there's other safety concerns prior to COVID that I don't think we need to pretend that didn't happen. We want to still keep our students safe. I think most of my other concerns have been addressed by the other staff and other parents that have come tonight and spoke. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Byrd.
Good evening. I am Carl Byrd, a Watchung Hills teacher of biology and special education. I will keep my questions and comments brief. First, thank you for the time this evening and the time spent in preparing this plan. My questions are not to critique, but in the interest to further develop and refine a plan to keep our students and our community safe. As someone mentioned earlier, a lot can happen with COVID in the time span between now and the time we begin our school year. The dynamics of this disease changes daily with different rates of transmission and different numbers of circulating cases. Hopefully the plan described tonight will keep everyone safe. However, the epidemiology for other known coronaviruses does show a seasonality with an increase of infectivity in the late fall. I am hoping that the board adopts a plan which keeps in mind this changing dynamics. Much like Homeland Security and levels of readiness, I believe we need to have a plan that adapts to the changing dynamics of this pandemic with daily changes, weekly changes, and monthly changes, and be able to react to that as necessary. Secondly, I'd like to hear more about how the plan can maximize distancing amongst our faculty, staff, and students. Under non-pandemic times, hospital workers do not rotate healthcare workers between departments or floors of hospitals so they can help prevent the spread of hospital infections. Has our plan looked into how we will provide coverage of classes to prevent the spread of COVID amongst cohorts of students? A business as usual approach to coverage of these classes may not be sufficient. Finally, what other planning has gone into maximizing time of cohorts besides the alphabetical order? We see a greater problem here than our colleagues in elementary education who have the same cohort of 20 or so students all day. With our students moving every hour between classes, buses, and the hallways, there still remains a large amount of risk for spread, and they may encounter a minimum of 100 other students even during our shortened day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd. Ms. Minieri?
Oh, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm Gretchen Minieri from Warren, New Jersey. I actually have a rising sophomore and a rising senior. I want to thank you. I know this has been hard for all of you. I know you put a lot of time into this, and I really appreciate all the effort that goes into it. I know that we will be back and forth. I'm sure this virus will be around for a long time, and we're going to wait a while for those vaccines and everything else to come out, but I'm sure it will be a while that we're back and forth. But I do appreciate you making this step forward. I guess one of my questions going forward is I really wish that the distance learning had worked. I have 4 children, actually. I have 2 younger ones as well. It doesn't for numerous reasons. And I guess I wanted to, I do like that you have the teachers in the classroom every day. I felt that my freshmen had no support, a lot of teachers that were absent the entire time. or nobody available after 1. So I do appreciate that. And if for any reason that the building is closed and the teachers cannot be there, though I would like to suggest that even if the students can't come in at some point, that the teachers are there. But that maybe you can put a plan in to address a more structured learning environment similar to their normal school day, instead of what I felt was more like a college assignment where things would be assigned on a Monday and due on a Friday, because that does not work with all students. I think that maybe if there's some sort of level to make sure there's even support for student across all classes. My children had different levels of support depending on the class. And I do want to see if there is any sort of plan for the school. This has definitely taken a mental toll on a lot of children, as we saw with that poor child in New Providence recently. And I think that there is having a rising senior, obviously, and no ACTs or SATs available, and all this, no being able to look at colleges while being there. I would like to see if there's any plan for the school to increase support, sort of guide counseling for kids, somewhere that they could call in. I know that normally that was available to them, and that has been a big thing that was removed by them not being in person. So if you just to address that, and I would thank you again for sort of following the science on this, because I know everybody is a scientist, but that there's, that the AAP, CDC, and NIS all had pushed for this, and the NIS even calling it unethical how we drop children and their education so quickly with no plan to return. So I do appreciate this plan. I really appreciate your work, and if you could just address perhaps somewhere how to give children more emotional support and a way to make sure that their actual educational support is there, even in the case that we do have to remove the children from the classroom again. Thank you.
Ms. Back.
Hello, I am Jordan Back, and I'm a physics teacher at Watchung Hills. And I just want to thank everyone. I know we've all said this before, but thank you all for your hard work in putting this plan together and for listening to our concerns tonight. I was just hoping for some clarification on the schedule a little bit. So teachers are expected in the building at 7:25, but classes start at 7:30, and I know we mentioned like a holding area prior to that. So I'm just a little concerned about getting people into the building, and if we have, you know, how much time is that going to take? What is that going to look like? How are we spacing people out? And then throughout the school day, really like what is transitioning going to look like? As well as just a concern over, you know, the students in my classroom we're saying are a cohort, but those students are then mingling with kids from other classes because, you know, they all take different classes. It's not like the kids in my class are together for the whole day. So we're really talking about a cohort of 1,000 kids who are then also going to their sports and other activities and mingling with kids from the other cohort. So my question, I guess, would be, you know, how exactly are we maintaining, you know, safe practices for a cohort if it's really just all the kids interacting with each other at the end of the day? And then my other question was in regards to the masks that you'll be providing. What level of mask are you going to be giving staff? Because I know the recommendations right now are, you know, depending on where you look, medical grade, you know, N95 masks. But are we going to be left with, you know, the same masks that they got at graduation, and are those going to hold up for an entire day of school being worn?
I do just want to clarify, the recommendation is not for medical grade masks. They actually tell us not to supply those for folks who are not working in the healthcare industry because they need those, and those are not necessary, but I can expand more on that later.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, so that's all my questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Back. Ms. Griffin.
Hi, I'm Kate Griffin. I'm a teacher at the high school. I share a lot of the concerns that have been mentioned, but a few logistical issues that were brushed upon, but I have specific questions about. First, regarding substitutes. To Carl's point, I'm wondering how the administration plans to address the lack of substitutes that we have. Before COVID hit, teachers were often asked to cover for one another. Considering now how many teachers who are going to have to call out because their own children will be remote learning, who call out sick with a cold or with COVID and then have to quarantine, you know, we're going to need more subs than we've ever had before, and asking teachers to continually cover for each other is then putting teachers more at risk. So that's my one concern on subs. My other concern is about teachers like me and many others who share classrooms. I don't know where I'm supposed to go when my roommate is teaching. I don't know where I'm supposed to go from 12 until 2:40. I certainly don't want to be in the room with her. And as Carolyn mentioned, my plan right now is to go to my car, but I don't know if the Wi-Fi will reach there, so I don't know if I can prep from the car. And then my last concern is the idea of the live stream. I just have concerns about the fact that we're all expected to teach synchronously. That does not work, especially with the arts department. It's a very, you know, I teach drawing and painting. It's very one-on-one. We're all working on the same idea, but we have individual needs. So I don't know how I'm supposed to do that continuously every day when every student has something different that they're working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. Ms. Ravinder.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Jewett, the members of the board, and all who are involved in the planning of the reopening for school for the new year. I just want to take this opportunity. Again, my name is Amita Ravinder. I'm a special education teacher at Watchung Hills, and a couple concerns that have come up, in fact, some of them have been mentioned, some have not. So I just want to bring up the students in the special education classrooms who need additional time. Will that be granted to them? Additional time to eat during snack time, to walk, who need assistance with cleaning not only their spaces but themselves, their desks, their learning spaces, who need additional support getting to and from their services. How will that be done? How will social distancing be incorporated for our employees, like our instructional aides, especially aides who are one-to-one? What will the distancing look like? What will it look like for our classroom aides in the classroom? I know for some of my classrooms, not only will I have all of my students working in the LLD with the LLD population, but then I may have up to 3 additional adults. So how will that look in a classroom? Will our instructional aides be given space that allows for social distancing when they are not with the student or when they are not with the class? Some of our bigger special education classrooms are where our aides go for a break to check their email. How is that going to be handled? And thank you, Kate and Carl. You know, Andrew brought this up. A couple people brought up, you know, how will the distance approach coverage for teachers who are out due to the quarantine, sickness, personal days, for any other reason? I know instructional aides are pulled from their students at any time to cover a class. Teachers are pulled during their productivity or prep periods. How are we going to look into that? Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Kyla.
Hi, sorry, I lost power before, so I'm hoping that that doesn't happen again. I'm Kyla Garcia, a health and phys ed teacher over at Watchung Hills. One of my questions is about the live streaming from classes. I'm concerned for our student safety. Being able to create a climate in my classroom is extremely important to me, where students are, you know, comfortable to learn, to grow. I want our students to be successful and to be able to actively engage in our extremely difficult discussions that we have in our health classes. And by live streaming our classroom, you know, it gives me a
Can't hear her.
Kyle, are you there?
No, she said in the beginning that she's having technical problems, so.
Kyla, I'm going to move on to the next person and then raise your hand again if you get reception back. Mr. McCullen.
Good evening. I'm Paul McCullen. I'm the director of bands and orchestra at the high school. There are just a couple of questions I have. Probably the most prominent one, which was briefly discussed, is the HVAC system. And specific to that, the aerosol study that was done in conjunction with groups like NAFME and the NFHS. I have concerns. We're 5 weeks out, and we're just now looking to bring someone in to look over the ventilation and HVAC system. I know that many of my colleagues serving on committees were very good about asking these questions for me. One of the primary ones I heard back on was that our HVAC system cannot support HEPA filters, which was a recommendation. Another thing I have concern about is PPE for faculty. Again, a recommendation for music teachers was to at least be wearing surgical masks. In fact, they jokingly said in it they would recommend N95s to us, but that would create a shortage for healthcare workers. And my last concern has to do with the scheduling. It's just at the moment it seems to be done alphabetical. Again, NAFME and many other arts organizations in our state had done a very good job of offering recommendations and guidance for developing in-person curriculum that would benefit music and art students well. I don't think at the moment they've been taken into consideration. And when I look at my rosters alphabetically from past, if I look at them alphabetically, my classes ensembles won't be split in half. They could be actually 2/3 one way or another. So I would appreciate that the scheduling be looked at a little bit better and with a little bit more care rather than arbitrarily just alphabet here to here. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cullinane?
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity here to talk tonight. Just 2 or 3 comments.
Can you, I'm sorry, can you just state your name and where you're from, please?
Sorry, yeah, my name is Rory Cullinane in Warren.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so just 2 or 3 comments. One is in relation to the transportation. Will there be sanitizer on the bus? That's one question. Secondly, we seem to be placing a lot of emphasis on thermometer and temperature checks. Is there any thought or consideration to giving that responsibility to the bus driver before children actually get on the bus, as opposed to having them arrive in school with potential fever? And then finally, there's one other comment in relation to high contact areas. Could you give consideration as well? Somebody mentioned earlier about the cleaning staff being increased, but it still wasn't appropriate or wasn't being done efficiently. Is any thought been given to giving that responsibility to the teachers or even a student, you know, to spray down at doorknobs or their chairs?
That's what they just said. Clean. Oh, we lost him, Jim.
No, I'm still here.
Nope. Never say die.
Who's dying? I'm still here.
I apologize. I don't know. Somebody wasn't muted. Mr. Cullinane, continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But I think I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will address some of those issues in my comments after public comment.
Thank you.
Mr. Whrhs.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. My phone's acting strange. My first comment would be, I thought I read today that Governor Murphy issued executive orders saying that all students, regardless of social distancing, unless they have a medical condition, must wear a mask in the school. And what will be the discipline policy for a student who refuses to wear one or removes it, does something inappropriate, like cough on someone else thinking it's funny? How will that be handled? Second is, this is just personally with my wife and I. My wife is immune compromised. My father-in-law just had open heart surgery in New York, and he's in pretty bad shape. And while we'd like to keep our distance from him as much as possible, he's still going to need our attention. So this is extremely stressful for both my wife, myself, and my family, because if you were to contract COVID, it would most likely kill him at this point. Thirdly is the school day. As my school in Scotch Plains has announced they're only doing a half day of school, and Watchung Hills is a full day. It leaves me in a very difficult situation, my wife and I as well, because what do we do with our kids who are both minors if I'm required to be in the building till 2:40 and they get out early? So along with many other concerns, along with the 3-foot room, 3-foot distance in the classroom, along with many others, I know this is extremely challenging. I'll leave my comments on that.
Thank you. Mr. Oftedal.
All right, can you guys hear me? Can you hear me?
No, barely.
All right, so
I think that's a little bit better.
is it good now?
That's good, yes.
All right, good. Hi, I'm Evan Oftedal. I'm a social studies teacher at high school, 18-year veteran.
Evan, you just went out again a little bit. You were much better for a second.
All right, let me try.
You sound fine right now.
Does that work?
So far, yes.
All right, good. Evan Oftedal, teacher, social studies teacher. I have some questions about the HEPA thing too. I'm glad you guys are checking out the HVAC system, but I'm just wondering if we would be permitted to purchase portable HEPA filtration systems for our classrooms in order to help mitigation. And if we are allowed, would the school be willing to reimburse those? Second, and this does not really apply to me, but what steps are being taken to, and I apologize, my internet pussed out a few times, but what are the policies for teachers who are at high risk, medically speaking? Will they be given leave or whatever? Myself as a parent of 2 elementary school children, my son invariably gets a cough every October, and family illness days are capped at 5. I'm wondering what the procedure will be if my son or daughter in school has to quarantine for any reason, if those family illness days will count against me. I kind of more of a comment, you know, I think we've all seen the reports in the newspapers about high schoolers gathering large parties and causing super spreader events. My concern as a high school teacher is, you know, those kids are mostly asymptomatic and they're coming into school after going to a party over the weekend. So I guess my ask of the parents and the community at large is, can you please keep an eye on your kids between now and school so that we can mitigate the risk as best we can? I firmly believe that, you know, if we work together as a community, that we can help, you know, work through this. But if, you know, one individual doesn't do that, then we're kind of, well, we'll have some problems on our hands. And then last question, and I know this has been asked, but, you know, what are the procedures for notifying faculty, staff, or even the student body of a positive test within their cohort or within a classroom? You know, knowing that we see up to 90 individual student, you know, well, I don't know how many students will be in my class, 12 or 15, so 50 students a day. How will that be dealt with? Thank you. And I really appreciate the work you guys have all done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Delabovi.
Hi, Matt Delabovi. I'm a physics teacher at Watchung Hills. I'm glad to see you're all well, and thank you for everyone in the stakeholders that are working on this plan. I have 3 concerns, one of which to follow up on Ms. Egley's comment about recording the, the classroom meetings. I know I did this in the spring. We posted the Zoom meetings on Google Classroom. One thing that I noticed is that after having, say, a half-hour session of this meeting, it took a lot of time to process that video file on the computer. I tried this prior to using Zoom with Google Meet, and it took even longer, and the file sizes were much, much bigger. So my concern here is, and I know that the bandwidth issue has been considered, but the issue of server space and hard drive space for these, the files for these Google Meet classes, and the effect on processor speed on teacher computers. to please look into that to see if that would, say, hamper our ability to, say, start the next class after that. My second was just a point of clarification on the cohorts and the whole the Wednesday schedule, where it seemed like the schedule was going to be Mondays were cohort A 1 through 4, Tuesdays cohort A 5 through 8, and then repeat on Thursday and Friday, but that Wednesday would be the flip. But then it was said that the days would be rotated on a daily schedule. So does that mean that it would be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, just rotate each day, or is it going to stick to that Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, with the Wednesday being the flipped day? My third thing is to kind of fill in with what Kevin was asking. I know some people have brought up the idea of having young children and being able to find childcare for them and being able to put them in daycare all day long. But some of us do have school-age children, elementary and middle school-age children, where that's not really an option to have them be in some kind of childcare after school. And this idea of an A-B cohort seems to be pretty common across the state as the main go-to for addressing the in-person versus distance learning at this point. My concern is that, I have a school-age daughter. I have a daughter entering middle school, and looking at her schedule as having an A-B cohort, she would be every day at least home from, say, 1 o'clock to 3:30 by the time that I get home alone. And then the days where she's not in school, home alone all day for over 8 hours. I know we're looking at this schedule being important from a social emotional standpoint, and looking at the developmental health of our students. And I know it's not just, say, my daughter, but also children of parents in this district who both work, or single parents who need to work, where their children are going to be home alone all day. And to kind of look at the schedule of teachers still being here until 2:40, whether that's necessarily the best case for our own students and for the parents of of our students versus our children. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Karnas?
Hello, everyone. Ken Karnas, teacher of history. Thank you for all your work and what I know is an unenviable task. I just have a quick question to leave with you, and then a comment to kind of personally just end with. I was just curious about whether teachers would be receiving class sizes and lists for A-B days. I know that a lot of classrooms are different sizes. Some smaller classrooms are not going to accommodate the same number of classrooms as students as others. Also curious about who and how this will happen, and who's responsible for determining class layout. That's my question. I'll leave with you, and I just kind of wanted to provide a comment that I'd like to speak to in listening tonight. There's an appreciation your faculty and staff has for the efforts. That is clear. The professionalism that I think they've demonstrated tonight is despite their incredible anxiety and frustration, are all equally as clear. But I think more clarity on details for these plans, as well as answers to these and other questions, are what is really going to matter at the end of the day. I think it would be an understatement to say that everyone I have heard tonight has been remarkably cool, calm, and collected. And it is a sign of the professionalism of the employees at Watchung Hills in being the professionals that they are. But I can also say that there has been a much more honest and genuine anxiety and stress that I have seen play out over the summer, and that I know a lot of my colleagues have seen play out with each other via phone calls, association meetings, our own exec board discussions for the association, debriefings with the reopening team. I can tell you right now, they are speaking honestly, but they are holding back emotionally. And I say that to just kind of emphasize that I think part of that is because of their professionalism, but it also should be noted of how anxious people are. I hope that you will take these questions and concerns seriously. Safety is, as you stated, your #1 concern, and your staff right now is concerned. Please hear them. Please take care of them. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Karnas. And Kyla, I see you were able to join us again.
Yes, hopefully I don't lose power. If I do, then it's just, I was not meant to ask any questions. So again, Kyla Garcia, health and physical education teacher. As I was mentioning before, a concern of mine is the live streaming for student safety and my ability to create a climate in our classroom that is conducive to learning and student growth, for our students to be successful, but most importantly, comfortable to actively engage in the extremely difficult topics that we cover in health classes. How will you be able to address the possibility of other people hearing our students partake in these conversations as we want them to participate, and possibly people recording those? Another concern of mine is, as mentioned before, so I won't really hit on it for too long, but how young people are known to be asymptomatic. How can we contain that spread? And then not a question, but a concern would be, within my years at Watching Hills, I mean, I've had countless amount of students either having passed out in class, unfortunately having seizures, other severe medical issues in my classroom, in the hallway, in the bathroom. It's not in my nature to just step back and watch. I am very hands-on. The safety of my students is, you know, the utmost concern. How can we, I mean, we have to bring that into account as well. We need to keep our students safe and our faculty as well. And if we're going to be hands-on and doing everything that we possibly can, we've got to make sure that we're being put in the best situations. And then lastly, again, is just on the HVAC, is due to evidence stating, you know, adequate ventilation, and I appreciate the presentation stating the HVAC testing, both air quality being stagnant in so many classrooms and not having windows. Are you really able to guarantee all of the classrooms with proper ventilation? COVID is transmitted through the air, and cloth masks, although they are extremely beneficial and helpful, they are not enough, which is why, you know, our nurses and our doctors and the medical staff need the medical grades, but they're not only wearing those N95s, but they're also wearing face shields, they're wearing goggles, they're wearing everything else. That's not going to be brought, you know, to us. So just another concern. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ludington.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I just want to thank you guys very much for all the work that you did. I know that Murphy has said the only option is that we do need to do live education at some point, face-to-face. So there wasn't really the option of us all going virtual. And I think that's kind of important to note. But one thing that I currently have a rising sophomore at Governor Livingston right next door. And I think one of the things that hasn't really been talked about, because the health and the safety of everyone is so, so important, but so is keeping a schedule with these kids and keeping them motivated and giving them some kind of normal in terms of curriculum. And I think that the way that the schedule that you guys have created, although I totally appreciate and understand the hard work you put into it, it really has us only seeing our classes 2 or 3 times a week. And if there was any way to try to do it so that we keep somewhat of a normal schedule. I know, for example, Governor Livingston is having their morning classes, and then they're going home at lunchtime and then logging on for their afternoon classes. And then they're switching AM and PM the next day. And that way the students, when they go back full time, which hopefully we will do, their schedule isn't that different from what it is. And they're seeing their teachers every day. And I know a couple of parents have already mentioned tonight that what we did in the spring did not work very well for them. And I kind of agree as a teacher that we need to keep some sort of a schedule if we do virtual. But right now, virtual isn't the option since Murphy isn't allowing us to do that. But hopefully if we can create a committee or something and really get some quality teacher and parent input into that committee if we do end up going virtual, which I think is probably very likely. And that is all. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Boss.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to contribute to the discussion. I have a comment, I guess more so a comment, yes, regarding the live Google Meet sessions in the goal to make it synchronous for those learners that will be participating in the cohort, participating from their homes. I really believe that it should be mandatory. If the purpose of it is to record live, these students should be participating during that time. They should be required to log in and they should be participating during that live session. I have a niece who is in South Plainfield High School, and her high school schedule during the distance learning this spring required their students to be participating live over the course of several days during the school week. Just speaking from experience from my students during that springtime that participated during the live sessions, I really saw a vast difference between their work. They were truly more successful in the work that they turned in. And I really believe that they were more engaged during those sessions as opposed to viewing the recorded video and submitting emails or comments or communicating during the Google Classroom opportunity. So just a comment for consideration. Thank you again.
Thank you. Mr. Dower.
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, I think my comments
Excuse me,
are
I'm sorry. Before you start, can you just state your full name and where you're from? Thank you.
Yes, sorry, Elizabeth. It's Daniel Dower from Warren.
Thank you.
Sure. My comments are going to be pretty quick. I think the board and the administrators here should seriously reconsider the remote learning. My biggest issue is 98 to 99% of the teachers who have had comments on this have spoken more openly regarding the HVAC, the 3-foot rule, and their own personal safety, as opposed to hearing about how they are going to educate my daughter for the next year. The last 3 months of the school year were absolutely atrocious from a distance learning perspective. I think there needs to be an awful lot more focus on how the distance learning is going to work for those 2 to 3 days that the students will be home, or the potential 5 days a week if we go to a full lockdown. It's absolutely ridiculous that the teachers of this organization are more concerned about HVAC than they are about teaching my daughter. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brown, there are no other hands raised at this time.
All right, so I'm now unmuted.
Oh, hold on. Sorry, one other hand just went. Ms. Matiasi.
Yep.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Morgan Matiasi. I'm from Watchung, New Jersey. I have a rising junior and a rising freshman who will be attending the high school. I want to reiterate what a couple of other parents have said tonight, that indeed the distance learning plan that was in effect in the spring at the high school did not work. It was not helpful and supportive. I am encouraged that there seems to finally be a better plan in process for all of this, but I do look forward to reading the detailed plan that the Watchung Hills is sending to the DOE. And I am also interested to know, since you are changing policies for the school, if there will be a new illness attendance policy, excused absence procedure for students when they are not in class, as far as the doctor's note and all of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Shanahan.
Hi, this is Abby Shanahan from Warren again. I meant to ask earlier, but I was wondering how lab classes are going to work with the science department, or if they're even going to happen. So thank you again.
Thank you. Last call. Okay, Ms. Suppin.
Hi, yes, again, thank you to everyone involved in creating the plan, as everyone has been kind to acknowledge you. I just want to say something to the parents who are listening into this, who have made a comment about, us talking about, the HVAC and things like that. I think that the reason why we are bringing up these safety issues in this regard is because we are not able to teach your children effectively if we are not in a safe environment, if your children are not in a safe environment, if your children are exposed to the virus. And so please keep that in mind, that it's not that we're thinking of, the building or whatnot. We're thinking about the best way in which we can give your children instruction. And the best way for that is to do it in the safest way possible for everyone involved, for the faculty, for the staff, and most especially for the students and for the student body here at Watchung Hills. And I understand, and I hear, and I'm sure many of my colleagues would agree with me on this, that what happened in as far as the learning environment in the spring was very much so an emergency, last minute type of situation. Whereas moving forward, from what the feedback that I've gotten so far from what I know personally, and I'm sure many other people would probably be able to speak better to this, is that moving forward, if it was a virtual type of environment, there would be a lot more structure, planning, preparedness on our part as a school district moving forward. So please keep in mind that all of our comments, we are trying to also show you that we are concerned, but we are also very concerned for the well-being of your children here. Thank you.
Okay. Are we ready to move on?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you for everyone's comments. I have a list here, and I know Dr. Jewett has a list. Now, Dr. Jewett, I wasn't sure if you wanted to respond now or you wanted to go through the agenda items and respond. What would be your preference?
You know what? I can do it now, and it's up to you guys.
So
but I
that
can do it
people,
now, that way folks
yeah,
can
because
sign
then
off.
people can leave. It's getting late. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Okay, so I'm going to go through some of the comments. I'm going to ask some of our other administrators and board members here. Actually, Dr. Shabilsky, did you want to just comment on the 3 to 6 feet piece?
Thanks, Dr. Jewett. All of this is obviously very stressful for everyone, and I want to assure everyone that the administration and the board is very sensitive to the fears and concerns that exist about this. Before I hit the 3 versus 6 feet, I think everyone needs to understand that the science in this is not complete and is not going to be complete for quite some time. And this is a disease that we are going to have to probably live with for an extended period of time. The only way to eliminate your risk is to not expose yourself to anyone else. And that's really unrealistic in society. For some people, maybe it's achievable, but the reality is that this is probably not going to go away. I know that we have been led to believe that a vaccine is going to solve all of this. You should keep in mind that there has not been a successful coronavirus vaccine to date. And so the belief that a vaccine is going to solve everything is probably unrealistic. And the data shows that people can not only get reinfected, but their ability to fight this after having been exposed to this declines over time, and that time may be measured in months. So ultimately, we're going to have to figure out a way to live with this in a way that reduces relative risks, but is not capable of eliminating relative risks. So that brings us to the 3 foot versus 6 foot, because I know we've been indoctrinated into the 6 foot social distancing. And there's actually 172 studies that have been done across 16 countries trying to look at the distance issue. And the primary study that's looked at is a Canadian study, which found that the combination of face mask, eye protection, and 3 feet or more is the ideal situation. So again, it's a relative risk measure. If you're further away, obviously your risk is less. If you're closer, your risk is more. And it's all a balance of risks that we have to figure out. And I think my final comment would be to address a question about whether the board would consider virtual only, even if it's not required by the governor. And I think that, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of the board, but I'll speak on behalf of myself. If the science is pointing to the risk is too great, regardless, in my opinion, of what our governor is saying, if our community risk is too great, then it will be my recommendation that we go all virtual. I understand that that is not an ideal teaching situation for students, but the bottom line is that we're going to have to weigh benefits and risks on almost a day-to-day basis to come up with something that many people may not be happy with, but ultimately, as has already been said multiple times, safety is our primary concern.
Thank you, Dr. Schabelsky. Mr. Morrison, since your organization did a lot of the research on the arts recommendations, do you just want to provide some clarification on some of the things that were said that weren't entirely correct?
Sure. I mean, just a couple items regarding the recommendations around N95 masks for music teachers or any of the arts teachers. That is not a recommendation that was made as part of the report, either from the University of Colorado on the aerosol study or the guidance that our organization put out for the safe conducting of arts classes. And the same thing is true with some of the issues around singing. The reality is that there is no situation that we're going to put forward and that anyone can put forward that brings the risk to zero. What we're dealing with is how do we mitigate the risk? And so if we put all of our kids in the classroom without any mitigation strategies, that's not a good scenario. Neither is putting all of our singers into a classroom without mitigation strategies. So the recommendations that have come forward include mitigation strategies on how to conduct the programs in a safe environment that takes into account all of the science, all of the best practices, which include wearing masks, larger social distancing than what's being required here. That's why you hear us talking about ventilation, because ventilation is a key component to that, and also limiting the amount of time that the students are in class together. So it can be done safely if you use proper mitigation strategies, and that's the information that has been put forward. So those classes can be done safely, but you have to follow proper protocols, just like any of our classes need to follow proper protocols in order for them to be done in the safest possible manner. And then the last thing that since I have the floor for a moment, I just want to reiterate, one of the comments, and I really thank Ms. Suppin for her comments at the end, because I completely understand all of the concerns and issues that the teachers are bringing forward and the legitimate concerns that they have. I mean, we all have, share in trying to figure out the best way to do it, not only for our students, but also for our faculty. And as I've been doing this work over the past several months around the country, one of the things that we talk about is that Maslow is greater than Bloom. Which means that our students can't learn until they feel safe. And our students are not going to be able to learn if our faculty does not feel safe in order to provide that instruction. So we are very much aware of that, and that is definitely front and center of every decision and everything that we are considering at this time. And to the degree that we don't have 100% of the answers, that's largely, as Greg pointed out, we're trying to check the box on what do we need to get to the state first so that we make sure that we hit that number. And in the meantime, there is certainly going to be additional opportunities for us to revise, provide additional answers, and take additional guidance so that we can do this in the best possible way that's available. And then lastly, I will absolutely reiterate what Greg says, or Dr. Schabelsky said regarding whether the decision to go remote. If the science is pointing us in that direction, then I will support us moving in that direction.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Mr. Stiles, can I ask you just to clarify some of the HVAC information? And
Yes.
I also, somebody had brought up the plexiglass in the classrooms, but I think we also talked about the fact that that actually restricts the airflow, but I'll let you expand upon that.
Yeah, and I'll reiterate with what Greg and Bob said. I understand your anxiety. I really do. You had some very personal things that you were talking about. I certainly don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable and nervous about coming in, which is why we've been putting a lot of effort and time into things like HVAC and the cleaning and the touch points. This is stuff we started back in spring. I think there was a comment that, why are you doing the HVAC now? Well, that's not true, and that's not really what I was saying. I was saying that we've been talking to our architects and engineer and having them reviewing the system. As our operation committee meetings met, there were concerns, that they wanted a deeper understanding of what we had. So we've asked them, our engineers, how do we go about doing that? So what we're doing is we're having a balancer come in and review areas. Now, for me to do the entire building, that's going to take a bit of time, and I don't know if we can do that in the time we have. But I also don't know if it's necessary. According to our architects and engineers, there are very similar classrooms right next to each other. Obviously, the ones that are key, and I think a couple of you mentioned them, rooms without windows, certainly they take a higher level of importance. Not that the other ones aren't important, but the windows help. I mean, just like any interior rooms, smaller rooms, those kind of things will certainly get our attention. I think there was the chorus room was mentioned. I think that certainly is one that I have my eyes on, only because I know there's a lot of kids in that room, and I know that there's no windows. It's an interior room. So rest assured, we are going to look as many as we possibly can. However, if there's two rooms right next to each other and it has the same ventilation system, it's a little bit redundant if the air quality in the room is the same. But if we can get to it, we'll get to it. I just don't know if we can get to all of them. In terms of HEPA filters, our system's not really designed to do HEPA filters. If we put HEPA filters in, it actually restricts the airflow into the room. This is according to the engineer. So you're actually making things worse with those HEPA filters. Now, someone brought up bringing in their own personal system. We can't really allow that because we can't be sure what you're bringing in meets or exceed the indoor air quality standards. Not to mention there's a whole bidding issue going on there. I can't really just start reimbursing all the teachers who bring in items like that. That would be a violation. But if you have concerns in your classroom, I would ask if you have a specific concern in terms of the ventilation that you're aware of, and not the heat or the air, the ventilation, meaning the air circulating in the room, I would ask that you bring that to our attention immediately, and then we'll make sure that that's reviewed. And in terms of the partitions, if we put partitions that were in one part of the room where the teachers are, the problem there is your heating and ventilating systems, you're basically shutting it off. So that's actually worse for you. What we're trying to do to mitigate that is everybody is going to be provided with masks and a shield. Again, the science isn't perfect on the shields, but it certainly helps. There are areas that are high traffic, such as the main office, the guidance areas. I think Gwen mentioned, she has a small area, those where she meets one-on-one with students. That would be something that we would really look at that, but it wouldn't be in the whole section of the room. It would just cover, almost like when you go to the store and it comes down from the ceiling and goes so low to mitigate that sort of transmission. But anyway, so yeah, we've been looking at all of those things. It's just, time is definitely not on our side for sure. The rules came out on the tail end of June, the road back. So that kind of gave us a short period of time to start pushing ahead. And there are things we did in spring there's things we knew, and I mentioned that in the presentation, like the touch points, those kind of things we pushed right away before the road back plan came. These other mitigation items, we've been pressing on trying to get them. I think that's most of the points. Was there any other points that came up in terms of filters?
BAC things.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna do the best we can. If we can get all the rooms, that would be wonderful, but I can tell you that that's a monumental task.
Thank you. I'm going to go through some of the points, and I am actually going to ask Mr. Maluso, our Director of Technology, after I go through some things, to speak a little bit to the live streaming so he can provide some more details on that. So I'm going to go through, I tried to take copious notes on the questions and comments. As what Dr. Shpilsky said, Mr. Morrison said, and Mr. Stye said, we are doing everything in our ability to make all of you, staff and students and parents, feel as safe as possible. And if we at some point feel we are not able to do that with opening school, then we will make that decision, regardless of, of what we are told to do, because safety has to be our number one concern. In full transparency, we don't have the answers to every question yet because we're working on it still. If you look at a month ago till now, a month ago was right before the 4th of July. When you look at how much has changed from then till now in terms of the situation, in terms of the guidance, the same thing, we have 4 weeks until teachers return to school. So there is going to be a lot more that changes in that time frame as well, I'm sure of it. But we are continuously working to address these issues and prioritize what needs to get done first. So with regards to the question with arts, science, and physical education, those meetings are actually occurring this week to discuss the more extensive plans for those particular courses. When we talk about outdoor classes, the arts classes, the music classes in particular, are what we're looking at, perhaps being able to have outdoors. We're hoping to be able to rent tents, but of course, there are issues with that in terms of getting those approved, by code officials and those sorts of things. So we're trying to get over those hurdles. With regard to physical education, I know there were, questions asked about changing for phys ed. Obviously, if locker rooms are going to be closed, then activities are going to be modified because we can't expect students to participate in rigorous activity and not be able to change or clean up afterward. So that's all going to be discussed. And some of these classes, when we talk about, there was a concern brought up about bringing classes outside. Well, how will we lead then the virtual students? Just like in any, in a normal class, the teacher, some days is providing direct instruction, other days the students are working on projects. So when we talk about outdoor classes, while we generally mean arts classes and phys ed classes that will go outside under normal circumstances, perhaps if an English class has a writing assignment that day that they can go and do outside, and the students at home may be working independently for a majority of that period. It's not going to look the same every single day, and that's why we have the time set aside for professional development for staff so that we can work on these things and figure out how to enhance this. That was, very numerous feedback from the staff in the spring was needing additional support on how to deliver this type of instruction. So those are the things we're looking at. And with regard to security, it's no different than when we normally have classes go outside. Also with regard to doors, when we were referring to keeping doors open, we were referring to the doors in between the hallways. And the reason that right now they're closed and the students open them when they switch classes to get through the different wings of the building is because, as per the fire code, those doors need to be closed unless they can automatically close when the fire alarm goes off. So that was one of our projects, is we are making all of those doors so that they can stay open, so that it decreases touch points when students are switching classes, but that they will be linked to our fire alarm system so that they will close. But our exterior doors to the building will not function any differently than they have in the past in terms of them locking. And the question that has come up that we anticipated with regard to what happens if somebody tests positive, what happens if somebody displays symptoms, what happens if somebody's asymptomatic but tests positive, what if somebody's displaying symptoms but tests negative. So we're actually working on a document, and our county is working on a document, hopefully that will be consistent for the county, but we've received some guidance from them. So we're starting to work on our own FAQs that explain each of those scenarios and how people are expected to quarantine. And really, that's where the contact tracing comes into play. So if a student, one example is if a student tests positive, no, we will not be sending an email blast out to the entire school, that a student tested positive. But anyone that's where the contact tracing process will begin, and anyone who has had extended contact with that student, which what they consider is contact without a mask for more than 10 minutes within 6 feet. So, however, what the county health officials have said is that even though all students will be wearing masks at all times, they basically go by the assumption they act as if nobody's wearing masks. So anyone that's been within 6 feet of that student, regardless of whatever PPE they're wearing, they would require them to quarantine. And we have all of those, we're working on all of those different scenarios because there's a different length of time depending on if you test positive or if you test negative, but we're working on that guidance so everyone has an idea of that. But anyone who has been in contact, I know somebody had mentioned they thought it was only if if the people in contact develop symptoms, but that is not the case. It's anyone who is determined to have been in close contact, so within 6 feet for more than 10 minutes, they will be alerted and contacted and will follow the quarantine guidelines. So again, that is evolving, but that is something we are working on getting out to everyone. With regard to teaching remotely, so we are working on a case-by-case basis, with the accommodations that we are able to make for staff members. For teaching positions, it's not really feasible to have remote teaching positions when we are going to have students in school. So, that position is more difficult than some of our other positions where we are able to work that out. But with all of the questions regarding staff childcare needs and medical issues, as we've said prior to this, please reach out to Ms. Scheiderman to talk about your specific situation, because every single situation is different. There is the expanded family leave, and I know she has provided information on that, but for that, please reach out to Ms. Scheiderman. With regard to monitoring passing time, students coming in the morning, those are all going to be very administrator heavy, because we know that the teachers have expressed that they're not so comfortable doing those duties. So for teachers who are comfortable, we will certainly utilize them for that. But in terms of passing in the hallways, snack time, those will be heavily administrator supervised. Just to clarify though, so that people know, in terms of the temperature checks, I mean, now if you go for a hair appointment, there's not a medical professional that's taking your temperature. You don't need to have a medical certification in order to do that. So we'll be getting creative if that's the case, but we are looking to have temperature taking kiosks as people enter the building. And that is really secondary. The primary screening is parents at home. So somebody had mentioned about screening the students before they get on the bus. That is exactly why we're having parents complete the screening at home, so that a student does not even get on the bus if they're exhibiting any of the symptoms. And we are finalizing that screening checklist. And there will be additional instructions on there that indicate, just because you answer yes to one of the questions on the screening checklist, you're not automatically excluded from school, but we will do further investigation.
Right, Liz, just
Yes.
on that, the fact that it's going to be in our Genesis system will allow the nurse and to have access to that information so that she can do follow-up on that if there's symptoms or somebody reports being ill, so that we can prevent anybody from coming to school.
Exactly. Yes, thank you for pointing that out. And that brings up also, there were questions asked on what if a student doesn't wear a mask? What if a parent doesn't fill out the screening form? That is all going to be in our policy and our handbook. We are revising our student handbook to include the health and safety practices and the expectations that we have for students and the consequences that will come with not following them. If a student is not, look, I expect our students to comply with these health and safety guidelines, but in the event that there's an issue, we will deal with that accordingly, because the health and safety of everyone is at stake. So we will be taking that very seriously, but that will be in our policies, and we will be revising our student handbook and publicizing that to our entire community so they know what those changes are. I know there were questions asked about senior early leave, and we're working on that right now. Honestly, so the schedule's not going to rotate. It's only periods 1 through 4 and 5 through 8. We figured rotating that would make it even more confusing. But as we're looking to obviously, have the minimum amount of students in the building at a time as necessary, that's not off the table. We just haven't finalized that yet. Also, with regard to the schedule, I think some people joined late, and so I just want to make sure that everyone understands that the students at home will be participating in synchronous instruction. So every day, our classes will rotate, periods 1 through 4 and 5 through 8, and that rotation will happen every single day. So if Mondays 1 through 4, Tuesdays 5 through 8, Wednesdays 1 through 4, Thursdays 5 through 8, Fridays 1 through 4, regardless whether it's A or B, because if you're in school or you're at home, you're still following your classes every day. To try, and we went through many versions of a schedule, many, and poked holes in all of them, and tried to, narrow it down to the one that we thought was the best of the, the worst case scenarios, because these are, obviously are all not ideal. And so we initially had talked about a full day. The only reason we are not doing a full day, it's not because the building is not safe or it's not safe for people to be there all day. It's because we could not figure out a way that we felt comfortable having a lunch period for all of those students. So it's not that we feel that the teachers aren't safe being there in the afternoon. And we do feel that time in the afternoon is needed. Some of it's going to be utilized for additional student support, for support services, for therapeutic services. Some of it will be used for professional development. And if people were to leave and go home, everyone lives various distances. So there's a lot of travel time, and then we lose a lot of the school day. Our intent is not, if we're doing professional development, we're not going to have teachers together in a conference room doing professional development. There may be some things in person that are very spaced out. There will be some things virtual, but there will be a variety of uses for that time. And again, that we will articulate over the next month. But please know that, we would never say, well, the building is not safe for students, but it's safe for teachers. It's just that the lunch is the only reason that we are having the early dismissal for students. And with regard to the rotation of the days and the schedule, as you know, we have 4 K-8 districts that send to us. And so we obviously, want to try and coordinate with them as best we can, because we have parents who have students at our school and at the lower level. And one of the pieces of feedback we received in the comments in the initial survey we sent out was parents asking that if possible to have their younger and older children on the same schedule. So when we did split it alphabetically, that was not arbitrary by any means. It was so that we could try and coordinate it with the elementaries. And also what we have been doing since we did that split, we ran a report in Genesis to look at what the breakdown of all the classes were. And now we've been doing some rebalancing to make it so that the classes are as balanced as possible. Obviously, it's not all going to be perfectly split in half, but we are being very mindful of that and looking at that. And supervisors are actually walking through classrooms. As we know, our classrooms are different sizes. So we're seeing, what we can accommodate in different classrooms. So that, it's certainly not an arbitrary decision to do it that way. There was a lot that went into that. In terms of, somebody asked about visually screening. So we will have, again, the duties in the morning when students are coming in, that will be mostly administrators, security. But in terms of visually screening, we will be training the staff on the symptoms of COVID, just like they're trained on a lot of other mental and physical health issues, so that they can identify students in need in their class. This will be very similar, so that if a student is exhibiting symptoms during the day, a teacher can identify that and report it to the health office.
Liz, do you want to just talk about how we're going to have probably four different ways that the kids will get in? I think people were asking how, that.
Yes. So we're looking in terms of student entrance and exit. So we are in the afternoon, we've actually added time to our dismissal so that we can stagger student dismissal. In the morning, our buses and parent drop-offs occur, staggered already. So we're looking at, we may assign students to different entrances that they are to come into in the morning, but there will be a certain number of entrances that have the temperature kiosks at them. And so we will, and we're also then trying to minimize the time that students are in the building together before the first time slot of the day starts. So we're looking at some options for that. And if we secure the tents, that might be one of the places in the morning where students are socially distanced outside prior to coming into the building. So we're still working on that. With regard to special education students that need accommodations, of course, that will be worked out with their case manager, as we've always done. With regard to cleaning, obviously, the other benefit of only 4 periods meeting per day is it's less, transitioning of students from period to period. But we are going to have the wipes in every room so that students will be able to wipe down the desks at the beginning and the end of class. Because obviously to try and have enough people on our custodial staff to go into every classroom in between classes is not possible. But students will be able to wipe down their desks before and after class. With regard to substitutes, we don't have a sub shortage. We actually, a lot of our regular subs are returning, and we are adding more. The reason that we end up using our employees sometimes to cover classes is when we only need 1 or 2 periods of a teacher covered and don't need a sub for a full day. We utilize staff members during their productivity periods. So just to clarify that. And, with regard to, okay, so it looks like I have 2 other things on here. We will be adding to our acceptable use policy that sessions are not to be recorded. Unlike in the spring, we are doing synchronous instruction. So students are expected to attend the classes every day. That is certainly an expectation. They will be expected to sign in. They will likely be expected to turn their camera on. Again, because we are not recording, we have a little more flexibility. It is not a violation of FERPA or anything along those lines. This is, providing virtual instruction, so we're well within the guidelines. And with regard to absences, we will certainly, we are certainly encouraging people not to come to school if they are sick. So, that will certainly be taken into account with regard to student absences and credit loss for a course and those types of things. There are state guidelines on what actually counts as an excused absence. So that's why everything, if it's not on that specific list, it's not excused, but that is really the technical definition as per the NJDOE. With regard to the way we take it into account, we certainly do not want students to be coming to school if they have any kind of illness symptoms. So, you know, that will certainly be taken into account. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Maluso to speak a little bit about live streaming and all of the work that has gone into piloting that and some of the things that we're still working on putting in place.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So live streaming, asynchronous learning is the goal for our hybrid period, which we're about to enter into. And the IT department has run some extensive tests and see what this experience will be like. And essentially, I'll try to paint a picture for you now. The teacher will be able to position themselves anywhere in the room and wirelessly connect to a smart board or projector in the room and share their screen with students in the room through the smart board and also through Google Meet. Questions that are asked by students physically in the room will have to be repeated to students on the far end at home. We looked at our bandwidth concerns here, and we're able to handle up to 150 Google Meets concurrent streams at the same time while having overhead for productivity tasks by staff and students so they're able to conduct their lessons. We're also have some concerns about audio and being picked up by students in the room, but a lot of the equipment we looked at is unfortunately on back order. So repeating the question is probably the biggest limitation we might see right now, but I feel confident that through professional development and getting comfortable with Google Meets, we're able to overcome any shortcomings. And Google as a platform is preparing to launch a very big update in the next few weeks that will either match Zoom's capabilities or surpass it.
Thank you, Mr. Maluso. Ms. Barone, did you have any additional comments you wanted to make?
I do not. Again, but I do want to say one more time that the fact that we've had so many teachers come and listen and participate in the opening plan is very heartening. And the fact that their comments were thoughtful and measured and professional, I certainly appreciate, because it is true that we can't really move forward without everybody collaborating and moving together, and hopefully we'll be able to do that.
All right.
All right, my internet is going in and out. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good, because you guys froze. All right, so the next portion of the agenda is really our action items. I don't know if we have any more discussion on the action items. That anybody has any questions, but otherwise I think we can move right into the action items.
Great.
Before you
sorry.
make that motion, Bob, I just want to, I see a bunch of names on the screen. I think, I know Peter's not here. I know Jordana's not here. Is Naresh?
No, Dr. Chan has not signed on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, Madam President, I'd like to move item A1.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments as to A1? Which is the reopening plan.
No.
Okay. Roll call, please, Mr. Stives.
Mr. Hayek?
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mrs. Ober?
Yes.
Ms. Potter?
Yes.
Dr. Shabilsky?
Yes.
And Ms. Barone?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Madam President, I'd like to move items C1 through C3.
Second.
Any questions or comments on C1 through C3?
No.
Hearing none, Mr. Stiles. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hayek?
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger?
Yes.
Barry's getting shifted.
You froze. I said yes.
I froze? Okay, sorry.
No, I froze.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mrs. Ober?
Yes.
Ms. Potter?
Yes.
Dr. Shabilsky?
Yes.
And Ms. Barone?
Yes.
Okay, motion's carried.
Madam President, I'd like to move items D1 through D4.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on D1 through D4?
No.
Hearing none. Mr. Stiles, roll call, please.
Mr. Hayek?
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mrs. Ober?
Yes.
Ms. Potter?
Yes.
Dr. Shabilsky?
Yes.
And Ms. Barone?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
We now are at the portion of our meeting. We have the second opportunity for public comment.
We do have a couple more people for public comment.
Okay.
Ms. Shanahan?
Hi, Judy Shanahan, Warren Township. I just had a quick question about if a student or a faculty member has a doctor's note, if there's been thought to whether or not they would be allowed to be publicly in the building if they have a doctor's note saying they don't have to wear a mask. That's it, though. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Grunther?
Okay, sorry, it didn't unmute for a minute. My question is maybe for Mr. Meluzzo or maybe Mr. Stiles, and it is this. If a family has 5 kids and they're each supposed to perhaps, depending on how they might be in middle school, and suddenly each kid needs an individual device, has the school looked into whether each kid is really going to be able, to, sorry, there's really a lot of noise, hard, whether, looking at hotspots, I had a student who didn't have Wi-Fi during the spring, and it took almost a month for the school, for whatever reason, I don't know why, to get her a hotspot. So I'm wondering if that has been looked at when we look at these families where there are many kids who are gonna have to be online at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Morgan Matiasi?
My question is, Mr. Morrison's company, when you started answering the question that Ms. Jewett said, you have expertise in this. You did not clarify the company, and I don't know what that is, who it is that you work for or the group that you were involved with, and I'm interested to know that.
So at the end of public comment, we'll review some of the questions that were asked. Thank you, Ms. Morgan Matiasi. Mr. O'Reilly?
Hi, thank you. Greg O'Reilly. Considering it was said several times that, there's going to be a lot more, evolutions to this plan, not just in terms of understanding, the new guidance that's going to come from the state and Governor Murphy's ideas. I'm curious, in what ways are we going to reach out collaboratively to the faculty and staff in order to, hear their insight and input and how to implement those measures more effectively? I'm sorry, it's difficult to hear. I think somebody's mic is on.
If somebody has ambient background, okay, it's gone now.
Thank you. And Jessica?
Sorry. Hi. So my only question was, are you
Sorry,
going
can
to
you
be
just state your name and where you're from?
I'm so sorry. Jessica Steinhardt, and I'm from Warren. I'm a parent of a 10th grader. Sorry, 11th grader. In any event, I just wanted to ask, are you guys going to be posting this anywhere? Because I missed the entire first portion where you presented stuff. So are you going to be posting it anywhere? So that's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Anyone else? No other hands, Ms. Brown.
Okay. So Dr. Jude, if you want to just hit a few of them, I think like the posting one and.
Yes. And actually, Mr. Morrison, do you just want to provide the information on the very extensive report that was sent out to all arts educators and superintendents in New Jersey?
Sure. The organization that I run is called Arts Ed New Jersey. It basically is the oversight body for arts education in the state. We provided a reopening report in early July called September Ready, which looked at all the aspects of different ways that schools would be reopened in person with restrictions, hybrid models, or totally remote, and provided guidance to districts and administrators on how to provide instruction and taking into account certain things like mitigation strategies, cleaning issues, proper cleaning and supplies for the various artistic disciplines, particularly those such as visual art and music, where there's more equipment that's being used. And then also Arts Ed New Jersey is one of the funders of the COVID-19 study at the University of Colorado, which is the first major study that's being conducted on the spread of aerosols as it relates to the performing arts. So whether that's music, whether that's theater, whether that's dance, and the different aspects in those areas. So that's the background there.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. With regards to some of the other questions, yes, this entire presentation will be posted. The PowerPoint itself will be posted by tomorrow. The video portion of it, we also generally will post that with the presentation, and the video of the entire board meeting, we usually get those up by the end of the week just because that takes a little editing. But this will all be available, and we will be sending a lot of follow-up communication out about all of this this week and in the coming weeks. But there will be correspondence going out to the entire community that contains the presentation, along with a letter to accompany that. So that will all be going out. With regard to teacher participation, we will be continuing to certainly solicit input as we move through the next month and into the school year. So of the 50 participants on the reopening team, 20 of those were teaching staff members. So we've had a lot of participation. Every department was represented. And now as we get into some of the more granular conversations, supervisors are meeting with members of their department, those who are available over the summer to go over these things. And so there will certainly continue to be very active teacher involvement. With regard to students who have medical notes to not wear masks, we will be dealing with those on a case-by-case basis, but we are looking at our policy and will likely ask those students to participate 100% virtually or require those students to participate 100% virtually, because we do have to take into consideration the health and safety of the rest of the student body and staff. So, that has not been finalized yet because we are developing those policies, but that is something that the administration has talked to the board about. And so more information will be forthcoming on that. And then with regard to the question about the internet access and hotspots, I'll let Mr. Maluso actually speak about that a little bit. I know that we had a few students that needed hotspots and they were on back order in the spring because obviously everyone needed them. And so that's why it took so long to get those to those couple of students. But I believe Mr. Maluso has been sending out, has been really monitoring access. And I think we're in a pretty good spot right now. But Mr. Maluso, I don't want to speak for you because you have more intimate knowledge of that.
Thank you. Yes. When we first had our closing back in March, we had placed the order for 6 hotspots based off of a parent survey of those who do not have internet access at home. I think I received the last hotspot at the end of April, beginning of May. So there was quite a back order there. I currently have one spare. The rest are still out with the students who have requested it in the spring. We will need to survey incoming freshmen or ninth graders to see how many they will need there, and I'll probably be putting that out shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Meluso. All right, that's it.
Okay. So we have to go back into executive session. And we do not expect there will be any action after executive session. So at this point, unless there's any other business from the board, I'm going to ask for a motion for us to go back into executive session and say goodnight to everybody.